so I'll go ahead and turn the mic on, call the meeting to order. We are here in Freeport Town Council chambers on Tuesday, September 5th for Town Council meeting.
I just muted my speakers.
For Town Council meeting number 17-23. And on the council tonight, we have with us Councilor Pillsbury. Present. Councilor Fournier. Here. Councilor Lawrence. Here. Councilor Daniele.
Here.
Councilor Bradley. Here. Vice Chair Egan.
Here.
And Chair Pilch is here as well. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. In your packet, you have minutes from our meeting number 1623 from the 1st of August. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the minutes and accept them as printed? So moved. Thank you, Councilor Bradley. Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes? Say aye.
I abstain.
And one abstention from Councilor Fournier. Next up, I have some announcements. I have 4 announcements. 3 of them are from the library. The Friends of the Freeport Community Library's annual book sale. The book sale will be held on September 21st to the 24th in the library meeting room. Donations will be accepted at the library starting Tuesday, September 5th through Tuesday, September 19th. Proceeds help support programming and museum passes at your library. Next, you can now use your Freeport Community Library card at select Minerva libraries and check out materials in person. Your card must be in good standing, and the library must be a participant of the Minerva Shared Borrowing Group. Give the library a call or stop by for more info. And last up from the library, they have a new face on staff, Jamie McAlpine, who has joined them part-time at the main desk. So please say hello next time you visit. And from Town Hall, we have immediate critical openings on the Board of Appeals. The board meets the first Monday, 6 p.m. at Town Hall. The Board of Appeals hears and decides on appeals to administrative decisions of the Codes Enforcement Officer and land use decisions of the Project Review Board. We're also seeking people to serve on the Cable Regulatory Board and Board of Assessment Review. So those are all the announcements I have. Does anybody else have announcements from the council? Seeing none, we'll move on to our 4th order of business, which is information exchange, which is a time for councilors to exchange information with each other and the public about meetings we've attended or goings-on. It's been a month or so since we met last, so I imagine there's some information to exchange. Councilor Egan.
Sometime last month, I don't remember the exact date, but biking enthusiasts, initially organized by Sam Kapala, met informally to bring up the idea of trying to create and improve mountain biking opportunities within the Hedgehog Town land holdings, avoiding the summit. We actually identified a couple of places where some trails might be built, including a small pump track. So that's in the works, and the next effort is for that in-between group to set up a meeting with the Conservation Commission folks who would match up those ideas with their management plan. But Sam already did some homework on that, so we think it's going to be a good fit. So that's exciting to hear that there might be some more mountain biking opportunities in and around the Hedgehog land holdings, which are adjacent to Hunter Road Fields, and most importantly are directly in the node of the bike connectivity that's going to happen from downtown out to our various amenities on the west side of the highway.
Thanks, John. That's exciting news. Anybody else? I've got some sort of disturbing news to report, which I think you'll hear about in a minute too, but we've had some incidents, at least 4 incidents that we know about, of hate-motivated vandalism in town. some in public bathrooms, some in public parking lots that I think have since been covered up, but nonetheless they happened, which is disturbing. So what I've done is we had, I don't want to say similar, we had a racially motivated incident almost a year ago, last November, outside Antonia's. And we put together a statement from the council. So I took that statement, modified it a little bit to be less specific about a particular incident and just addressing incidents in general. So I'll read that and ask you if you guys still support the similar sentiment, because I think it's important that we recognize it and that we say something about it. So the town council statement on racial justice, if you all approve it, would say, hate crime is intolerable and has no place in our town. We wholeheartedly condemn any attempt to intimidate, threaten, or otherwise harm someone based on their race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, gender, disability, or sexual orientation. Our town contains tolerant individuals who are accepting and welcoming towards residents and visitors of all kinds. When we uncover racism, we will continue to act swiftly and morally to bring justice and prevent any further instances from occurring. Everyone who sets foot in Freeport, as a resident or as a visitor, deserves to be treated with respect and fairness. We take pride in looking out for each other. In the past, our police department has acted promptly and thoroughly to investigate incidents related to hate crimes. They have worked with prosecutors at the county and state levels to initiate the filing of criminal and civil rights charges. Our law enforcement officers share our belief that Freeport should be a safe place for all and will continue to work diligently in support of this goal. While we may like to imagine that our town is free of racism and other hate crimes, times like these remind us that there is still work to be done. We need to continue to educate, enlighten, and empower our neighbors to speak out against racism and to speak up when it rears its head. So that's almost the same words we used last time, but again, reiterating them because it's important to do so.
Does this have to do with the public bathroom?
Yes, the public bathrooms and parking lots is the ones that I'm aware
They
of.
were racially motivated events?
These were not racially motivated events. They were hate-based vandalism, so graffiti based on religion or race. There's some were racially motivated, some were religiously motivated, from my interpretation. I expect we'll hear more.
How is this different from what we did last time?
Last time we just talked about a specific incident and what we did about the specific incident. I just removed the language about that specific incident and what we did about that specific incident. The other words are essentially the same. Yeah, but I just emailed this to you before the meeting, and I'll make sure it gets posted on our website as well, like it was last time. Yeah. Anybody object to posting that on behalf of the council?
Not at all.
No objection. Frustration. DA won't prosecute. Our PD goes in, they do the investigation, we get suspects, it goes to the DA's office and it dies. If we truly want to curb the vandalism in our town or whatever, we need to have a DA office that will prosecute that and back our police department. So if we're going to have a statement, which I will support at this point, I think we need to follow up at some point that encourages the DA to, in fact, prosecute vandalism and what they call other, non-violent crimes. But we're seeing an increase in that because no one's held accountable. So I hope we could do that.
Councilor Bradley?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I agree with that approach, but another alternative might be to create a penalty for hate crimes in our town and make it a violation of a town ordinance that has a significant penalty associated with it. Then we don't have to worry about the DA who will say, I'm overworked and I have, cases from all over Maine to deal with, or all over Cumberland County. We could enforce it ourselves. I know that this is not you're not going to do that in one meeting with something. It's a process we have to consider, but that's another approach we could take.
Yeah, I would be open to that if there's a way to do it, and we can do it legally. I think it makes sense and certainly puts a lot of teeth behind the statement. It's one thing to put words on the website, it's another thing
We
to.
have teeth.
Yeah.
I think another,
The last statement didn't stop this one, and this one won't stop the next one until there's a consequence.
I just wanted to add, I think after talking to Nate Goodman, our police chief, one thing that this doesn't mention is in cases where they suspect it's youth, our police department collaborates with, they have a resource officer in the school and the RSU to try to, you know, reach out to the pupils or handle it in the families and handle it through education and together in a partnership as a first step, which I think is really, a part of this is education. I think that's really important that as a community we work together, especially in cases of the youth. So that's the only other thing I think you could maybe add to that.
Could we refer this to ordinance for ideas?
Yep. We can do that. You know you're on the ordinance committee, right?
At least for the next month.
Yep.
Okay,
I'll
so
work fast.
ordinance committee meeting really quickly here.
Yep, we've got a number of things to look at. But I think this is an important one as well. And then for folks that are interested in pursuing this, of course, you can reach out to any of us. We have a social racial equity committee that we established a little over a year ago. And I know that I've been reaching out, along with some others, to the civil rights team at the high school, which is changing their name. But it's a group of students at the high school that are interested in civil rights issues. And I have a connection there with a family member. So I'll be talking to them as well, just to kind of make sure that they're aware of the issues, that they're doing what they can to educate the next generation of people to be aware of it. So we're still in information exchange, so if there's any other information to exchange, sorry to take the wind out of your sails on that, but anything else? Okay. If not, we'll move on to the town manager's report, and then directly following that, we'll have public comment.
Okay, so I'll start with something a little more light and airy. But since it's hot in here tonight, it sounds like a good night to notice that we have our first refillable water bottle station outside of the restroom. So since it's hot in here tonight, if you need some filtered water, I know that's something our sustainability committee has wanted. It was the doing of Brent Moon. It was one of his last tasks ordering that for us at Town Hall. So we now have our first one, which I know that FSAB will be pretty excited about. A couple changes to staffing in some of our buildings. So we are having a mandatory customer service training for pretty much most of our staff. We're doing that on September 13th. We are able to cover, we'll have a little bit limited coverage during that time. We have to do it in 2 shifts so all of our staff can go. We did have an issue at the library, which will cause us to have a delayed opening of 1 hour so that all of their full-time staff can attend that customer service training. So on Thursday, September 13th, the library will be opening at 11 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. Courtney is getting word out on that. Also, we have one other department closure. The clerk's office will be closed on September 12th due to a staff shortage. We do apologize. We never like to close a department for a day, but on a skeleton staff, sometimes we have to do it when we can't have a body here. There are many services now that you can do online, so we encourage you to check out our website for a list of those services. The one thing we will note that for people that have nomination papers out for elected offices, the last day to return them is the 12th. So you can still return them on the 12th. We will have someone here to accept them, but if you have questions or concerns or need to ask the clerk something specific, we encourage you to do that before the 12th. Don't wait till the last minute. And Chris and Carrie will be reaching out to anyone that hasn't yet returned papers just to let them know about that. So as usual, it's been a very busy summer in Freeport. We've had a few events downtown, or a few days which have had multiple events which have drawn very large crowds, such as a very popular concert this weekend. We unfortunately have also had a couple of fires this month. We had 2 structure fires with significant damage to 2 residential dwellings. We had an RV that was a total loss, and we had an excavator that caused a fire. All of these within the August timeframe. Again, these are all pretty substantial events for a small town, and our draw on our staffing and resources at public safety. So just wanted to make you kind of aware of what they've been up to this month, because they've been pretty busy. We did put out a RFP, request for proposals, for the comprehensive plan update. We did get 4 quotes back. We're going to be putting together an interview committee made up of project review board members, staff members, planning board members, and we'll be also looking for 2 counselors. We're hoping that we could get something scheduled potentially for next week or the week after, so I will be emailing, looking for 2 volunteers that would be interested in being on that committee. You'd be interested in that? Okay. Thank you, John. Chip, all right.
Chip, too.
John and Chip, all right, we have 2. Sam Capala's on, so he'll be happy to hear that. He's the chair of the planning board. And then finally, I just want to give an update on the asylum seekers. So if you read the paper, saw the news, there was a group of asylum seekers that were brought into Freeport from the city of Portland. They were being housed at the Portland Expo and had to leave that location as it was no longer available. So the city of Portland has rented some hotel rooms in Freeport for these families. The plan is that, these are all general assistance clients, but the plan is that they will all find permanent housing hopefully within the year, hopefully sooner for these families. There's 37 families that were moved from the expo to the hotel. It's 147 individuals that are being housed temporarily. 67 of them are school-age children and planning to enroll in Freeport. And so the city of Portland has been working with the RSU to accept those new students and help them get ready for the school year. Food and meals are being provided by Portland, and they are having an occasional shuttle service 2 days a week to and from Portland from 9:30 to 4:30. They do have some staff on site from the city to help people find permanent places to live. One of the big questions I get is, what's the cost to Freeport? So right now, the asylum seekers are being covered under general assistance from the city of Portland. So food and shelter are being provided by the city of Portland through GA, which also means the state provides a portion of that. We've been working closely with Freeport Community Services. I expect we'll have some more information in the coming days. But at this point in time, the town of Freeport is not writing checks for any direct services. That's been a big question that we've had. So limited update, but wanted to give you what I got from the city of Portland this morning.
My question is, why is this Portland's responsibility solely? I mean, in other words, they're here, and we've had them here before, and they've been shuttled out, and now they're back. And our effort seems to be to keep hands up and money out of their use. And I personally feel we should be sharing in the responsibility for asylum seekers if they're in our town. I know through the schools we are, and that it's a big burden for the schools, but for the town isn't doing anything that I'm aware of. There was some discussion about some of the ARPA money that we sent to Freeport Community Services going in that direction, but that got resolved in a way that didn't spend that money. So I just don't know. I guess the simple question is, why is it only Portland's responsibility? Why doesn't Freeport step up or offer to step up in some way to help?
So we are waiting to see if there's needs that aren't being met at this point in time. Last time you guys did give ARPA money, you did give ARPA money to Quality Housing Coalition, which I think could be used for them. Should they be helping any of these people find housing? But we haven't had any direct requests come in. The city of Portland's really been doing it all on their own.
I know, and so as one counselor, I'd asked that we explore appropriate ways for us to contribute to the burden as responsible community that has these people in our town. I don't know enough to know what that should be, but the idea that it should be nothing strikes me as wrong.
We're trying to schedule a meeting with council leadership, Freeport Community Services, and the superintendent. So after that meeting, hopefully it will be before the next council meeting, we can give you an update and let you know if there's identified needs at this point in time that they need Freeport to help with.
But when I hear you say identified needs, it strikes me as requests coming from someone about a need that's unmet. And I'm trying to suggest that, there's obviously needs that are being met, and that we find a way that's appropriate to us to support those needs, independent of a request that's coming for some unmet need now. Again, I may be the only one who feels that way, but it strikes me I don't feel good about saying nothing about that.
Mr. Lawrence?
Are these 67 students, are they going to Freeport schools or are they going to Portland schools?
The email I got today indicated that 67 are going to Freeport schools.
There's help there.
That's not us, that's RSU, who'll get that burden, and
Well, that's our taxpayers.
so it's Durham and Pownell too, but that this town, our tax base, property tax base, as far as I know, is not going to support this need or this burden. Again, I'm the only one who feels that way. I apologize for taking all the time it's taken. But I think it's important that we step up.
Well, if they're going to the schools, that's one way that we're stepping up. It's all municipal money. It may not be municipal money to run the town, but
Councilor Fournier?
Couple things. I think number one, Freeport was kind of caught off guard. There was no communication coming in that we were going to have people relocated, so it makes it pretty difficult for us to get ahead of it. So they arrived. I've got some, relatives that work in the school system, and they've certainly got their hands full. They're doing a great job to get them implemented, but again, they were kind of caught at the last minute, and credits to the school system for doing a great job to implement 67 new students. And I think we do support them in other ways that people normally don't see. Our fire, our police, different people are down there fairly regular to support them, and so, there may be other needs. I think that's a good approach that you're doing, Carol, if there's something else that doesn't come up, but I think this is a bigger problem, Ed, that it's a bigger state problem. And how do we address this? And we'll be talking housing down the road, but it's certainly something, but, I think they are being welcome. I think they're well being taken care of. And, I think Lewiston was the only other place that those people were located to. So, I guess what I would like to see to come out of this in the future, that open lines of communication would come from wherever they're coming from. So we have an opportunity to get and put some sort of plan together and not get caught flat-footed.
Just for the record, not to kind of weigh in on one side or the other, but just to kind of put the facts out, the way I understand it is Portland is responsible for them because they were residents of Portland, so their general assistance will be reimbursed by the state. For 70% of their general assistance will be reimbursed by the state, so they're just following the law, the rules, the same rules that apply to all towns. They signed a contract with a hotel that happens to be located in Freeport, so at no point did they come to Freeport and say we'd like them to become residents of Freeport, or and I don't want to split hairs. I just want to. I know that there's confusion about how things work, so I just wanted to add that into the mix. But I think the sentiment that existed last year when the community reached out with donations and things like that, I imagine that's still the case. And if there is a need, I'm sure the community will step up. And if there's a need for the town to do so, we'll find out soon. I had one question for you on a different topic. The sign outside public safety is a little askew, a leaning tower of public safety signs.
Yes.
When's that going
our
to get fixed?
Town engineer's been working for a while to try to get that fixed for us.
Okay.
We don't have a timeline. I think he did just hear back from a contractor.
Okay. I'm afraid it's going to damage the sign, and the sign will stop working. So hopefully we
I'll
can get
follow
it
up with
fixed
him
before that.
tomorrow and
Okay.
see. I've seen some emails come through on that.
Okay. Other questions for the manager? Okay. So our sixth order of business, as it is in every one of our meetings, is a public comment period. So the way this works is we set aside up to 30 minutes for public comment. We invite anybody who wants to from the public to come up and address the council. It's not a time for debate with the council, it's just a time to offer an opinion or thoughts. Everybody is allocated up to 3 minutes if they want to use it. We ask that you just introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're from, and then tell us what you think. And if you just want to line up behind the podium, and whoever wants to start can head on up. And if there's anybody on Zoom who wants to speak, you can raise your hand.
The microphone is positioned to capture your voice. No need to move it towards you.
Okay.
Do you have a timer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey,
The timer.
good evening, members of the town council. My name is Ella Tabaski, and I work here in downtown Freeport. I'm a resident of Brunswick. And I stand before you today as a concerned member of the community, hoping to address an issue that has deeply troubled me and really threatens the unity and harmony of the town. In the past 4 months, I personally have encountered not one, but 2 disturbing incidents of hateful graffiti within a 1-block radius of my place of work, which were mentioned previously. One at 100 Main Street that included the use of the N-word and a swastika, and the other in the parking lot at Middle and Bow Streets where the N-word was tagged 3 times. In both instances, response from law enforcement and property owners to cover up the hate speech was alarmingly slow. In fact, I personally covered up the most recent graffiti with a friend after having waited weeks for the first incident to be handled properly. I bring this matter to your attention with the hope of raising awareness and urging the town and community members to take meaningful action against these hateful acts. Racist graffiti isn't just vandalism, it's a stain on the very fabric of our communities. It not only targets specific individuals, but it sends a message that bigotry and prejudice are allowed to fester here, and we cannot stand idly by. I implore the council to take these matters seriously, and from your conversation earlier, thank you for what you've done so far, to denounce these incidents and to work tirelessly to prevent their recurrence. Hate should have no place here in Freeport, and it is the responsibility of our community leaders to ensure that our town remains a safe and inclusive place for everyone, regardless of their background. I humbly recommend the following actions be considered. Directing the Council's Social and Racial Equity Committee to convene as soon as possible to discuss these issues and create a multi-pronged approach to interrupting this hateful rhetoric. Engaging in public awareness campaigns that promote unity, diversity, and understanding within our community. Encouraging community members and businesses to report any suspicious activities promptly and ensure they have the tools necessary to cover up any hateful messages as quickly as possible. Ensuring that future police reporting is streamlined so that the council and town manager are notified of any hate crimes in a timely fashion. And collaborating with local organizations and schools to educate our youth about the importance of tolerance and inclusivity. We cannot allow these incidents to define us. Let's come together as neighbors and friends to make Freeport a place where all are welcome. I urge you to take the lead in this endeavor and demonstrate that we are a community that stands against racism and bigotry in all its forms. I thank you for your time and trust that you will take these comments to heart and work towards making the town a safer and more inclusive place. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Alex, the next meeting of the Social Racial Equity Committee is next Wednesday, the 13th.
Hello, my name is Ann Marisick. I'm a Freeport resident. I have lived, worked, voted, volunteered, and then run circles around this town for the last 5.5 years. I'm here in support of Ella's testimony and the actions that she's suggesting. On March 31st, 2022, so over a year before the incidents Ella's discussing, I noticed graffiti added to the bridge that goes over the train tracks here on Main Street. My apartment looks into that bridge, so I get a full view of the artwork that gets decorated there. In large letters, it said, N-word, F you. Was really disturbing to see. It's frustrating to see that anyone thinks that way and that they felt empowered to put that there. I immediately reported it to the police. I will say an officer did come out and look at it right away and said they would take care of it, but nothing was done. I called 2 more times and was finally told that there was dispute over who had authority over that space, which I understand. Was it Amtrak? Was it the town? But much like Ella's saying, I think there needs to be a quicker way of resolving this. I would have gone down and painted it myself if I had thought that I wouldn't get in trouble for tagging. It was finally painted over April 27th, 2022. So for a month, that hateful language was visible to everybody riding in and out of town on the Downeaster. So that's visitors, that's commuters, that's people seeing that and seeing and thinking that represents this town. And that's just not an acceptable thing. Between this and the graffiti that was just mentioned, the racist incident at Antonia's last year, there's been increased bigotry, and I'm concerned about the trajectory of the culture and the people in this town. I appreciate that we've welcomed these asylum seekers. I appreciate that this town is starting to look a little different, have some more cultural variety, and I appreciate the statements here tonight that you're taking this seriously. So I reiterate Ella's suggestions of some actions we can take, and I hope that we're able to stomp this out before it spreads. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments.
Hello, my name's Corinne Wheeler, and I also work here in Freeport, but I'm a mother of 3 children that go to school here in this district, one who just graduated, but one who is at the Freeport High School and one at the Pownell Elementary School. I have become aware of the recent vandalism, and I have heard of some vandalism that has happened at the school last year in our bathrooms, as well as what Ella has discovered here in our local bathroom, public bathroom and parking lot. And I'm here to support her and all of you and moving forward to create a safe space and a safe community for all. But my concern is really for the safety of our children. And I'm really happy that this town has welcomed so many new Mainers. And it seems to me, and my children report, that the staff and the students at the school have been very welcoming and kind. The civil rights team has been established at both the Pownell Elementary School and at the high school. And I look forward to meeting with one of the civil rights team members this Friday to discuss how they're approaching this new influx of students and how we can support them. But I'm really here also just to ask that the townspeople and the council members, the police department, the Tri-Town Equity Coalition, the schools, our local businesses, that we all work together and communicate well and swiftly to ensure that the hate speech, that the vandalism, and the intolerance for groups of people is just unacceptable. That we all take responsibility in ensuring the safety of our community, and through our leaders, that we work together, and we have to do it in a unified way and in a compassionate way to really stamp out that which threatens our freedom to seek and live peacefully here. And thank you very much. I appreciate all your work.
Thanks.
Thanks, Corin. Any other public comment? Anybody in the room or on Zoom? I don't see any. So thank you for coming out. Thanks for coming to a council meeting and seeing what we do. You're welcome to stay. We'll be here for a while. But I appreciate the fact that you all took the time to come and speak your mind on some pretty important topics. So thank you for doing that. And I offer to follow up with any of you personally if you don't get what if you don't feel like we're taking action, reach out to me, and I will follow up. So thank you again. Sir?
So, I mean, I can sort of understand what might have happened with the tagging on the bridge, and if there was a jurisdictional battle or something. I mean, it's unacceptable for it to take that long to be painted over. But are there gaps in when we get a report of something in town and our ability to remove it? I mean, are there, like, what's our policy? How do we approach it? What's the timeliness? Are there things that we can do better at?
I'll share a conversation that I had with Ella. The incidents that we've had, I think, have been on private property. So we can take the report, we can alert the property owner. Like Ella said, in some cases, if they're not acting fast enough, she did something on her own, which, we might not want to do as a town, but personally, I don't mind that somebody took that initiative. But that's always going to be an issue, right? Is it public property, is it private property? If it's public property, it's almost easier because we can direct Caroline, or I'm sure she would just do it on her own, just talk to our public works director and say, yeah, go fix this tomorrow. But if it's an out-of-town corporation or something like that, it might be a little harder. One thing that we did talk about, though, was Visit Freeport is pretty keen to jump on things like this because it's not a good look for our town, at the very least. So we were talking about seeing if there's a way to have a quick response kit. Here's white paint that would be good for covering up parking lot striping lines. Here's a sandblaster that you can rent from a local business, something like that. But here are a few tools so that merchants in town would at least have something they can use or a place they can go to for information.
Do we know if these incidents were from local people, or were they from, we don't know?
We don't know.
One of the things from talking to Chief Goodman is getting these reported in a timely fashion. Like, you know, if it happens in January, we might not all see it because there's snow on the ground, or maybe we're not using the bathroom. And so the further out, the harder it is for the police to investigate, and they don't have a good timeline. So, you know, they currently get about 800 to 1,200 calls a year, which is a lot. But if we can get these called in a more timely fashion, you know, as soon as we see them, just to be aware, you know, that helps them do their job better and more efficiently. And then also, you know, when calling them in, you know, sometimes we hear of incidences, but that's not what they get called in as, so we don't see record of it, or they don't see record in the call log. So, you know, calling them in and accurately explaining it to the dispatcher is really important too. If together as a community we want to stay on top of it, and like you said, especially if it's on town property, then we can more easily do something about it or get on it if they see it come through.
I just really like the idea of like having like a patch kit or something that's ready to go. I feel like that's like an actionable step that we can take. You know, we can tell the chamber and whoever else in town, hey, we've got resources for you, let us know. And that's just another reason that somebody would tell us or report it, which would be great.
Yep. So maybe we can take some action to encourage the chamber and visit Freeport to do things like that, or help them out if we can. Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah. Super. All right. Moving on to our seventh order of business, which is where we do all the voting. The first thing that we vote on is usually a consent agenda. So tonight's consent agenda has 2 resignations and then a number of appointments to various committees. So is there any reason why we need to consider any of these items individually as opposed to together as a consent agenda? Councilor Daniele?
I should ask this question earlier, but were all of these vacancies on appeals specifically already coming? Or is this, we had resignations? I was just wondering what's going on there.
Slots have been open on appeals board for a while.
Okay.
And you did have one new vacancy that was for personal reasons.
Okay, thank you.
And that's on the consent agenda, right? The
Right,
number
I
2, yeah.
Yeah, a side note, when you're walking in here, you might have seen on the bulletin board, there's like a volunteer with some hands. So Chris generously put together one of those for every board and committee, and so we intend to start putting those on social media, staggered, and on the town website to try to see if we can stir up some interest in boards and committees, because we're struggling on so many of them. To get people. So thanks, Chris.
All right, if there's no other objections, Councilor Pillsbury, would you move our consent agenda?
Sure. Be it ordered that the September 5th, 2023 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 7-0, which brings us to item 15123 regarding setting a public hearing for a consent agreement, which Caroline will tell us about.
Sure. So this is something Peter was working on when he was here and hadn't gotten resolved for various reasons. So it's back before you. I think you might have talked about it. The Lynx have a property that they own down on the water in South Freeport. I believe they came in to permit some work or short-term rental, and quite a number of violations came up. Most, if not all, I believe they actually purchased, and they weren't aware of them at such point in time. So typically they would get a notice of violation, but trying to work with him since they bought them, Peter had been working with him on a consent agreement to see if we can agree to allow some of these things to remain. So we have been working back and forth with the code officer and the 2 attorneys to come up with a draft agreement. Because it's in the shoreland zone and many were shoreland zoning violations, we did include DEP up front, because although DEP is separate and they will have final say on what they do for enforcement, we did want to make sure that we were coming up with something that DEP would go along with. So there's a couple things in here that you know, if they get damaged to a certain extent, they can let them stay, but they can't replace them. They'll have to make them go away. So you have draft language before you. Both parties have agreed to it. One thing that's not filled in here is fees. The legal fees, I believe, might be $5,000. I have to get an exact number from Jessica when she's back. You do have the options to put in civil penalties. I don't know if that's something you've done in the past. You know, I think it's really a decision the council can make. Other ones, I think you might have done legal fees or nothing. In this case, I personally don't feel like we necessarily, I think we want to be careful if we want to require that or not, because again, this wasn't all by the Lynx doing. They did buy some of it, but that's really a decision for you guys to make. So there's no numbers in here. Would have to get the dollar amount for the legal fees, and then I think if you guys want to talk about civil penalties, then I can bring some more information back to you. But the town attorney and the Lynx and their attorney will be present at the public hearing.
The way I read this, it looks like we can assess a penalty, but then suspend it as long as they comply with the other requirements. So we could say it's a fine, but you don't have to pay it as long as you do what you say you're
Yeah,
going
I
to do.
think you've done that for some other violations, and I can get a comparison number from Nick, to see what you've done on some of the other ones, if you would like that.
I think it'll be helpful.
Kind of
yeah.
like a
Yep.
performance guarantee to ensure they do what they're supposed to do.
Right. Yep. Any questions? We're just setting the public hearing tonight, but if there's any questions about it, feel free to dive in. Councilor Daniele?
Are we allowed to increase property taxes by like like I said, like $100, like it's a fee for, let's just say, $1,000 and it'll be $100 every year? We can make payment plans, right? So just like, not like saying, this is more just like general question.
You wouldn't do it as property taxes, but you can assess a fee if it correlates to the service or the violation. I don't see why you couldn't, but I don't know that you've done that in the past.
Just interested. Thank you.
Number 11 in the agreement is not a short list of violations.
There are a large number of violations. There were some permits
Yeah.
going way back.
No, I remember the previous conversation that
Yeah,
almost all of those were part of the acquisition.
yeah, and unfortunately, when the permitting, we did have staff down there over the years, walking over like the paved areas, stuff like that, so.
I don't see anything in, at least I'm not, maybe it's my fuzzy memory, but I'm not seeing anything in the agreement here that's dramatically different from the concept or the thrust of what we actually tentatively worked out previously. So happy to see
Yeah.
it finally captured here, but
There shouldn't be, it's just taken a long time to
get it resolved,
just
yeah. Okay.
resolved with everything else we have going on. And then DEP just had us change a couple, you know, shall remove the patio if this happens type thing.
sure, okay. Thank you.
All right. With apologies, Councilor Fournier, it looks like you're up to read the lengthy be it ordered.
Be it ordered that a public hearing be set for September 19th, 2023, at the Town Council meeting starting at 6 p.m. in Freeport Council Chambers, 30 Main Street, regarding a proposed consent agreement between the Town of Freeport, Gregory and Dorothy Link, and Hardy Farm Investments Incorporated for the property located at 4 Dixon Road, Tax Assessors Map 1, Lot 6-1, and for the purpose of enforcing and resolving violations of the following municipal ordinances: Chapter 65, Shoreland Zoning Ordinances, Chapter 21, Freeport Zoning Ordinances, Chapter 16, Floodplain Management Ordinances, and Chapter 61, Short-Term Rental Registration Ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. Any other discussion? All in favor of setting the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 7-0. Thank you, gentlemen. Next up, item 152-23, to consider action relative to automobile graveyard and junkyard renewals. Ms. Wolf, is there anything special we need to know about this?
Just have to turn it on.
Nope, this is just Mr. Dab Incorporated, David Baldock's renewal of his junkyard permit.
Which has been there for a long time.
It has, and Nick is on.
Okay. Questions? Councilor Lawrence, do you want to read this, be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the following automobile graveyard and junkyard renewals be approved. 1, David Baldock, DBA DAB, Inc., 13 Allen Range Road, Freeport.
Second?
Thank you, Councilor Fournier. Any other discussion on this?
It's worth noting that these are not easy properties to maintain, and throughout my term on the council, Mr. Bolduc has never had a violation. So I don't know him at all, but he's doing a really good job of keeping up his property with a lot of potentially toxic things.
Worth noting. Any other discussion? All in favor of renewing
Graveyard.
the automobile graveyard and junkyard?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 7-0. Automobile graveyard. I hadn't thought about that until just now. All right, next up, item 153-23, to consider action relative to signing the election warrant for the November 7th election. Back to you, Ms. Wolf.
So this is just the legal requirement to call for the election of our officers that are elected at an annual election each year.
And we have, just to reiterate, we've said this before, papers are still available, one for one counselor at large seat, one counselor from District 2, one counselor from District 3, 2 seats on the RSU Board of Directors, 2 seats on the Sewer District, 1 seat on the Water District. Papers are available and I think are due on the 12th, as we heard before, September 12th. Any questions on this? Counselor Daniele, do you want to read this, be it ordered?
Be it ordered that the election warrant calling the November 7th, 2023 annual election be signed.
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Lawrence. Any further discussion? All in favor of signing the warrant?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 7-0. Brings us to item 154-23. This one's going to take a little bit of our time. To consider action relative to establishing a Central Core District Working Group. This one's got my name next to it. So we're jumping the gun a little bit in the sense that a lot of the motivation for forming this group came out of the workshop we had on August 22nd with the, at the kind of initiative of the Housing Committee, which also included the Planning Board, the Project Review Board, and the Council. And there was a lot of discussion that night about what can we do, what should we do to encourage housing and development in general. A lot of attention was focused on the design review ordinance and other land use ordinance and challenges that we have in developing properties in town. So the general theme of the night, I think, and I don't want to steal your thunder for the discussion we're going to have later, was let's do something, and let's do something quickly. There's certainly some low-hanging fruit we could address and some other gnarly issues that we can start diving into. So a handful of us met after the housing workshop to try and figure out what the right mechanism was, because there were a few different ideas offered that night. And where we landed after a lot of back and forth and discussion was that it was very helpful in the past to have a group that represented the Planning Board, the Project Review Board, the Council, and a handful of other interested parties who don't normally have a chance to workshop stuff together. That was one of the themes that we saw that night, right? We don't often get these groups together. The Planning Board is busy doing planning, Project Review Board is busy reviewing projects, and we only see things that are a problem. So we said if we can get a representative from each of those groups, the intent was to keep it small so that they can move quickly, which is one of the things that I think is not, we couldn't accommodate everybody because there were 4 people on PRB that wanted to be a part of it, 2 or 3 people on planning that wanted to be a part of it. So we couldn't get everybody, we didn't think it was wise to get everybody who wanted to be involved in this group. So where we landed was to suggest a group, which we're tentatively calling the Central Core District Working Group, basically to focus on the downtown area and areas surrounding downtown, and to encourage not only housing, but to encourage more predictable and efficient processes that are fair and equitable to new development and to existing residents. So I'll list the names and roles that we landed on for the group so that you're all aware of what we're suggesting. So we have Sam Capalla, who's the chair of the planning board. We have Brett Richardson from the housing committee. We have John and me from the council. We have Ford Reike from the project review board. We have Guy Blanchard from the Freeport Historical Society. We have Caroline, who's our town planner and interim town manager. We have Linda Berger from the Social and Racial Equity Committee. We have Sue Norris representing the public. And who am I missing? We have a developer,
Yeah, we have to,
which we're still,
we have to connect with one of the two that we have.
yeah. We've got two who both, we've contacted two, and we're going to get one of them. So that's the group that we're recommending would meet. We're suggesting they meet every week. So it's not a monthly thing that drags on, but like, if you want to be on this group, let's meet every Wednesday, 12:30. They'll be open to the public. And we're suggesting they come back to the council with recommendations that can be implemented before the election. Since all 7 of us have been involved with this issue, we can act quickly on it. So the first set of recommendations, we're hoping they can bring back pretty quickly, within a number of weeks. And then we're saying, they could take up to 18 months to make additional recommendations beyond that. That's the spirit of it. So what questions do you have? Councilor Bradley.
The impetus for this was the project review board's ordinance being fixed was the term. And is that the message to this group, that the first item that they're to address is a quick fix based on their knowledge and review and information regarding the standards in that ordinance, to correct both the standards to make them less subjective and also to refine the process to make it more expeditious?
I'll try and answer that, and you can correct me if anything I missed. We had previously, as a council, set aside some money to hire a consultant to help us, I'll say, rewrite the design review ordinance. We don't want to wait for that to happen, so there's some things that we know we can fix pretty quickly, pretty early.
For design review?
A lot of which is in design review, yep. We don't want to limit ourselves to only design review, but there are some things in design review that we think we can fix. And just to put it out there, I don't think we're suggesting that we're going to exempt, all of downtown from design review, so that's not the intent of the group. We're not trying to sneak that in. But there are some things that we think we can get done, that we can recommend pretty quickly. My guess is that this group would probably stay together when we do hire that consultant and offer to be a working group for that consultant, to say, here are some things we thought about, here are some things we've heard from the community. How can we help you, consultant, in the work you need to do with the larger issue of rewriting the design review ordinance? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think the only thing that we would do is we can now kind of use this group to interview the consultant and really vet the ideas, because we said we want to fast track it. And so we're hoping that this diverse group will represent the many various opinions of our community, so that we can bring something forward quicker for consideration. We know that to do a complete overhaul, we are going to need some kind of prescriptive standards or drawings that really are a specialty thing that we would need a professional to help us through, whether it be drawing what buildings look like or picking out certain materials that are appropriate and going to represent what Freeport wants to protect.
During that Tuesday discussion, the principal group rep, who was in town and participating, suggested that, 80, I don't know what the right number, but a significant percentage of the kinds of things you're talking about are currently available as a result of the principal group's work, and all we need to do is access it. I mean, this is a good idea, so that's not the question. The question is not to create another, in my view, unfocused, never-ending sort of process that leads us quickly to a couple of things, but then sort of takes over the comprehensive planning for the planning board and becomes a, I don't know, call it an off-the-street gang for planning or whatever, however you want to talk about it. So it's hard enough for people to keep in touch and connect with what's going on with that. But Tuesday seemed to be an abrupt departure from everything, to get away from the exemption idea and to do something rapidly and quickly based on information we currently have, and these are the right people to do it. And so you expect within a short period of time before the election to come back with recommendations about how to fix that, and then we can move on with handling things like 22 Main Street and other things with that refined, repaired design review ordinance. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and I think, the small group that got together already had some ideas. We know there's gonna be some tricky issues in there, and some of them are gonna have to wait, but I think this group feels like there's changes we can make now to help the situation in the meantime.
Congratulations.
Councilor Egan. and then-
I was just going to add, kind of following up on what you just said, Caroline, that I think that the makeup of the group will be quick to say, this is going to be a torturous issue that's going to bring out so let's put that off to the side for a little bit better process. This is a pretty straight ahead, easy, we can change this, take the subjectivity out of it, put a specification in it, and there, as Caroline said, there's lots of examples available. So I think that'll be the ability to actually get some tangible results quickly.
I think the other important thing is when we talk about design, like at Tuesday's meeting, we were very focused on the commercial core, the center of Freeport, and housing and design review. But when we talk about design review, we're really talking about down near the Concord Burke condos near Desert Road, all the way up past Kendall Lane, and then offshoots of that. So we're talking of more of that. And although it impacts housing, it also impacts people that want to change their windows or people that want to change their doors. And so I think the RFP is for a bigger issue, not just housing in a couple blocks on Main Street. It's a bigger thing. And so I do think this group will come back to you with things that are not only going to potentially help housing, but impact in a positive way the people that live downtown.
Councilor Fournier.
3 points. Number one, if this group is formed, will it assist on the directions we've given you as a planner in rereading our ordinances to make them more efficient, more friendly, and more easy to achieve, or will it hinder?
So we think that if this group functions well and gives a good product, we think they have the right expertise to move on to other ordinances. We have a ton of stuff going on right now. We're about to start a comp plan. We have major ordinances changes with LD 2003 legislation. We actually have a group that Chip was on for for Downtown Vision that was working on some process mapping. So I think step one, focus is design review. If it works well, I think we could go on to other ordinances, but I think there's other people and other groups that want to get involved. So I see it as a continuation. I'm excited about the collaborative groups that will be involved. I think it's much more effective, but the other point that came out of this is that it's important that the members from these groups not only show up to these meetings, but go back to their committee and share the information as to what was going on, because I think there's some concern that we haven't done that well enough in the past with some other projects. So that's really important to make sure people are being kept up. So you'll start hearing from us.
Second point, I would like to add another position to the committee, and that being of a public representative that lives in this particular area. I think that's important because some people have been through the process on like residentials that we don't experience. And Sue's a great candidate, but she lives on Pleasant Hill.
So Sam Kapala, the chair of the planning board, who's on here tonight, we always joke that he lives in the jackpot because he has zoning and then he has an overlay district, the color overlay district, and design review. So he has experienced them all on a daily basis. Like he's had to come to the board repetitively. So we do feel like he would represent that. But if you feel like we need to expand on that we can add another one.
I just want to make sure voices are heard because people have talked to me how difficult it is to do different processes on some residents. If we're farming in this area, I think the more voices we have, I don't know, Sam's chairman of the planning board, so I think he's got a lot on his plate to begin with. So I think I'd like to see, one more with someone that lives in the district. And my second point is I'm concerned with the 18 months. And I like, Ed and I think the model that was used for the sewer district was a good model. We have some certain hot issues right now. So if this works well, great, then 18 months would be well. Now I'm going to go to the other side. Maybe we have some issues, or maybe we create more conflict, and maybe it's not working, and now we're going to be stuck with it for 18 months. Let's try this for a shorter period of time. I would like to recommend 6 months, just to see how this goes. And if it's hits a home run, we can certainly extend the time frame. I think a lot of times we form a lot of committees and they go on and on and on and on. So if we're very specific with what this is doing, which I think, this will achieve, but let's put the pressure that they have a 6-month time frame to get it done. I'd be more inclined to vote in favor with those two changes, 6 months and adding someone that lives in the district. Thank you.
Councilor Bradley?
First, I think, to Daryl's point, the short period of time the sewer committee had added some urgency to the discussions once the committee got set up, and that was helpful. So just to take that as, that I think you can extend it if you need to.
How long did you have on sewer? Was it 12 months?
No, we had 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah. But we actually took that as, okay, got to make your decision within 3, and then you have some time to, if you need it, to do something else, bring it to the council to get implementation. The other question I had was about substance. You have some developers in mind to add to this? I think that's important, and, you must too, or you wouldn't be doing it. Do you know who they are? Can you tell us?
We haven't contacted them, so I'd rather not share the
Oh,
name
okay.
in public. Well, we haven't heard
But,
back from them yet. But they're 2 developers. You're going to recognize both names. They're very familiar with Freeport.
A guy who's been really helpful in a lot of ways and is knows the town and been involved in things as the Tulip. And if he's not on the list, then if you would consider him, I'd appreciate it. I think he's very helpful and has a great style that helps conversations go forward as opposed to become finger pointing.
And he has some ideas on this topic that he's already shared.
I don't know whether he's in your group, but he'd be a good one if he isn't.
Councilor Lawrence?
Is this looking at the overlay zones too?
So.
And the reason I ask is,
Design review, and then once we get through that, part of the RFP for looking at design review was gonna be looking at the overlay. Some of the overlay can just honestly get absorbed, like the reduced setbacks can easily get absorbed to zoning. I don't know why they didn't put that there in the first place. But yes, we see the overlay getting absorbed into this.
it's not just
To
one,
some
it's
degree.
overlay on top of overlay on top of overlay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
But we've tried not to scare people by getting into that.
Okay.
Don't scare anyone till they're appointed, Chip.
The only comment I'll make about the timing is 6 months would put us into March, beginning of March, when we're going to be swamped with budget stuff. So my hope is that the group does something very quickly before the election, and then I'd like to give them some time so they could bring us something that we might act on when we have some more time. So let's say around this time next year, so maybe 12 months instead of 18 months. But that's just thought.
If they're hitting home runs,
Yeah.
I'll gladly extend it. But I don't want to tie my hands, and I think they're going to hit home runs. And I think we'll be very easily, and the other point, I think, we have an election in November, may have new people here, I don't want to tie their hands very long, so that would give them an opportunity to see, so, thank you.
Other thoughts, Councilor Pillsbury?
So this is great. I think, though, now we've got the original Housing Committee, we're going to have this committee, and I think there's still some gaps, at least in my mind, as to a comprehensive plan for targeting what types of housing we need and the plan to get it. So how do we bring all these pieces together? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make it, have a plan for development of the appropriate amounts and types of housing, changes to ordinance and processes, and beginning and looking at how we're going to incentivize the different types of options we want, whether or not it's like, TIF district, other funding. How do we bring all this together? Because this is great, but this is going to focus just on ordinance and review process. It's not going to, and we've already had the other recommendations of the Housing Committee that I think have value, but I think there's still a missing piece, and then how do we tie all that together? Because otherwise, we're just going to be a few months down the road, and it's not like we're going to be delivered with this magic solution. So, I mean, that's a whole mess I just threw out there, but I want to pose the question because I don't know how we bring this to conclusion in a way that's going to move our town forward.
Councilor Lawrence?
I would think that this is the first piece. You got to get the zoning done, you've got to get the ability to be able to build, and then we can go to the next part, what are we going to build? I mean, that's kind of, I think we know what we need to build. Honestly, we need, and I get your point, that we don't have the data points, I guess is what you're saying, but I think we know where the issue is that we need houses that people can buy in this town, and right now, we don't have that.
But I guess my only counter to that is I think you're right, but what if there are changes to ordinance that will spur the ability for us to develop more multifamily homes or more densely populated, like, what if we have to change lot sizes and things like that? This would be our chance to look at that. So how do we tie in what general direction we're going to and what we want to incentivize, instead of having to do this, come up with a different plan, and then maybe have to revise ordinances again?
I think you are gonna have to revise ordinances again because we're about to start a comprehensive planning process, and we might identify areas that we, as a community, want to increase our density or do things to encourage more housing beyond what we do today, or we might change our growth areas, but to amend our ordinances, they have to be aligned with our comprehensive plan. So I do think you'll have some of that. You are gonna have some changes. I think we are gonna want some different things. The downside to that is, I mean, that's 18 to 24-month process, so that is a little bit further out. And so probably to your point is like, what other conversations or what other recommendations that the Housing Committee made should we be looking at? And who's gonna be doing that in the meantime? We also do have LD 2003 changes that will be to you October, November. We might have to ask for a special meeting, just putting that out there. That is going to create additional housing opportunities in Freeport, whether that be even more flexibility on accessory dwelling units, which we already allow today. Some lots will be able to, instead of only having one single-family dwelling, may be able to have 3, others may be able to have 4, and then you're gonna have an affordable housing density bonus coming online, that in certain areas, they can get 2.5 times the density that they can already get today by making affordable units. So there's so many moving pieces going on, but I share some concerns that there's some recommendations made by the Housing Committee that aren't related to this that are still sitting there, and I think some members of our community feel like we still need to have some important conversations about what types of housing it is that we really want to be encouraging, because you might have 7 different opinions up here.
Councilor Egan?
I'll just add that a lot of the data that you were just referring to, Matt, is not that far below the surface, that there's a lot of really good data out there now, both with Maine Housing and also with federal sources, but increasingly with the pressure everywhere in Maine. More service groups and constituent groups are digging into that data and producing data, so the Realtors Group and Developers Group, Maine Real Estate Development Association, Merida, is another one that has, they have a pretty big membership and they have a budget, and so they can pay for that data. So there are a lot of good data sources. In working with the committee, Brett was able to find a number of data points on comparing wage rates to housing affordability and sort of illustrating the gap in a visual method. So I think it's there. Part of, at least from the meetings that I was sitting in on, part of the conversation about how fast and how bold to get with recommendations on affordability was tied into what Caroline was just saying, which is we can tackle that and then sort of undo it and redo it again during the comprehensive plan, but maybe more specifically, we can put that as one of the keystones for the comprehensive plan vendor, to focus on that as one of the key issues in the comprehensive plan, since it's coming at us from 5-6 different angles. So I'm hopeful, actually, that this group will be able to produce some very tangible results, and I would be fine with a 6-month focus initially, and if we're cranking out stuff, then we keep going a little bit. And I think that would be there could be and should be a natural sort of handoff to the comp plan vendor, and maybe reconvene from time to time for just some sounding board stuff. But so I think it's good.
You guys comfortable with 6 months? I'll just start, okay.
Yep.
And comfortable with adding a downtown resident? I don't have any objection to that.
You want a residential property, you want a resident, not just a property owner, so we're not looking for a commercial, we want a downtown resident property owner.
I'd like to have a citizen residence property owner that, yeah.
Property owner, not a renter, preferably?
Not a renter, a property owner,
Be
some,
able to change the.
Lives here and owns their property.
right, someone that would be subject to going through the process, should they want to change doors or whatever. The discussion we had about our friend on Bow Street.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I mean, interesting thinking through that. Part of the problem we're trying to solve is that that's not a very large population of people that live in, let's say, VC1 that own their property that are residential. Like, there's not, there's a lot of renters. But we'll find, I mean, I agree with sentiment. We need to find somebody.
I was gonna say, Chip has some connections.
Yeah,
I do.
yeah.
I lived in one of them.
I'm just across the street from the design review district. Okay, so I think we'll add a downtown residential
Residence.
property owner. Yeah.
So,
Okay, which means I think we're up to Counselor Bradley, if you want to read that motion, changing
Motion to change it to 6
18
months.
to 6. Yeah, we don't need a motion because we haven't read it yet. We can just, when he reads it, he can just make it 6 instead of 18. And I can help you with the names.
Be
for
it
the second
ordered
one.
that a central core district working group be established to exist for a period of 6 months to collaboratively study the processes relating to planning, development, and preservation of Freeport Central Core districts, and to make recommendations to the town council for actions the town could take and policies the town could establish to encourage more predictable and efficient processes that are fair and equitable to new development and to existing residents. Be it further ordered that the following individuals be appointed to the Central Core District Group. Those that were mentioned by
Yeah, I can
specifically, which he will
go through
insert into the,
yeah.
all of which we now know well. And in addition, a local town owner, resident, and a developer to be determined, to be appointed to the Central Core District Group.
Good enough. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Counselor Egan, for the second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I think that's everybody. Any opposed? No? That carries 7-0. So thank you for that. Look forward to reporting back on progress. We have one more item to vote on before we get to other business. This is regarding a resolution recognizing efforts put into activities for the 4th of July, which our interim town manager will talk about.
do you want to talk about it, or you want me to talk about it?
I'd be happy to talk about it. This resolution comes out of an effort that was made by a group of people led by Caroline and Tawny and to some extent council members to address the decision that had been made not to hold fireworks. And the idea was that effort came together quickly with a lot of good faith and a lot of energy and effort, and fireworks were held successfully in town, and we thought it would be important to recognize that in a formal resolution of the council. This resolution includes all the people that were participating in the 4th of July, including the parade, and the concerts that occurred, and the family fun walks and everything else. So it isn't limited just to the fireworks. It includes everybody who worked on the 4th of July, and including them all in the effort that was made to celebrate that important date in our nation's history, and Freeport's traditional participation in those activities, which are important, we think, and I think demonstrated again are important to the residents of the town. So the resolution is, it's lengthy. I'd be glad to do it, or someone else could do it. Caroline, why don't you do it?
I don't read the motion.
She can't read motions.
Oh, okay, we could do it. Somebody should read it on the resolution.
Yeah, why don't you take the honors?
You're
Yeah.
up, Ed.
Be it resolved, whereas the town of Freeport has a long-standing tradition of enjoying community events on the 4th of July each year, including such activities as a parade, fireworks, and other community events. Whereas, through the efforts of Coordinator Michelle Barker, isn't it Barker?
Barker.
Barker of Bath Savings Institution, the 4th of July parade was a smashing success with great participation and attendances from our residents and community groups. Whereas through the efforts and sponsorship of LL Bean, many community members and visitors enjoyed the opportunity to participate in the annual road race and family fun run walk and attend a free summer concert in Discovery Park. Whereas the annual fireworks were not scheduled to occur this year as a host site was needed just a few weeks before the 4th of July holiday. Whereas Pine Tree Academy, a school system in our community, stepped up to support it and advance the best interests of the town of Freeport, willingly worked with the town to quickly provide the launch site for the fireworks display, thereby acknowledging the needs of the community as important as their own. Whereas a number of organizations and businesses known as the Freeport Firecrackers, LL Bean, Bath Savings, Bradley Family Foundation, Buck's Naked Barbecue, DeRozier's, Desert of Maine, Freeport Chamber of Commerce, Freeport Oyster Bar, Maine Beer Company, Mass Landing Brewing, the Met, and Spartan Sea Farms quickly and generously contributed cash donations to support annual fireworks purchase and display. Whereas, together with the actions, efforts, and contributions of our community, the town of Freeport was able to move forward to continue with such important community traditions on the 4th of July holiday. Whereas the town council hereby recognizes the above-mentioned school, businesses, organizations, and individuals for their outstanding contributions to the citizens of the town of Freeport.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lawrence. And I'll note that Councilor Bradley was being somewhat humble when he said that councilors were involved. I think really it's Councilor Bradley who took charge and kind of got this group together and led it from a council perspective, so I appreciate the work that you put in. I recognize that.
I mean, every effort requires someone, but I had full council support. I mean, from the moment the idea was presented till the time the fireworks were displayed, every councilor supported everything that was done. So it couldn't have been done if I couldn't have walked forward and said the town council, I'm representing the town council. This isn't little Lady Bradley coming to help you.
Thank you for taking those steps forward. Any discussion on the resolution? All in favor?
Aye.
Relatively easy one to end our action
Who gets
items
the
with.
plaque?
We do have a plaque to
Oh,
present.
Yeah, who gets the
We have
plaque?
one that we were gonna give to Pine Tree because really if they hadn't come forward to have a host site, we wouldn't have been able to pull it all together. We just have to correct the spelling of a name.
Yeah.
Mark Barker.
Barker, Michelle.
And then we'll give the plaque to the Pine Tree Academy.
And then we'll give the plaque to Pine Tree Academy, or I'll call Ed and Ed will give the plaque to Pine Tree Academy.
Brendan Kruger and I can't remember his manager's name. We're just
Dustin, is it Dustin? Yeah, they were amazing to work with
And they
and,
did all the work. I mean, they said we're going to need help, and then they didn't need it. You know, it was just them.
yeah, and they can't wait to work with the town again.
So let's give them a plaque.
Awesome. I would like to beg your indulgence on reordering some of our other business items, and I apologize in advance to the group that's here for the affordable housing TIF. But what I'd like to do is move the last item to be the first item. So setting carbon reduction limits in Freeport, I'd like to have that be the first item for other business. Since it's a change to the agenda, I'm not sure, it's not really our actionable item, but just out of an abundance of caution, I'll make a motion that we change the order to have item 4 be first.
Second.
Thanks. Jake, any discussion about that? All in favor? Okay, thanks. So with that, we'll start out with the carbon reduction limit discussion, which I think will be a healthy discussion, then we'll move on in order to the rest of the items. Yeah, I was gonna say.
We just hashed it all out, so.
Right.
Okay. Slides for me? Oh, sure. Where are you going to have them? I think it has to be over there. Okay. I'll just push the little space bar. Okay. Hello, Mandy McPherson, Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board co-chair. So the Sustainability Advisory Board, FSAB, and GPCOG, Greater Portland Council of Governments, town staff, and our new sustainability coordinator have been working together on the Climate Action Plan for Freeport. So we've been gathering data and analyzing it. We've been going out into the community for outreach. We've been educating and also getting feedback. So we've done this through workshops, surveys, tabling at events, and our annual lecture series. So tonight, we have our new sustainability coordinator with us. Some of you may have met Meddy Smith. It's very exciting to have her. She's been doing amazing work so far. And she's going to walk you through a review of the process of the climate action plan, getting a climate action plan, making one. And she's also going to update you as to where we are with the target setting portion of that process. So I'm going to hand it over to Meddy, and I'll still be here, and Bob is here, so if you have any questions at the end. But thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mandy. And if you would be my ticker over there, that'd be great to change the slides. Just the arrow, yeah. So it's really great to kind of formally meet you all, meet this council body for the first time. Apologize for not having come sooner to give you an update on this planning effort. But my name is Meddy Smith. Like Mandy said, I'm the sustainability coordinator for the town of Freeport. It's a shared position with the town of Yarmouth, but I'm here most days. Caroline made generous space for me with a cubicle down in the planning department. And I'm really happy to be part of the team here and get to know the residents and businesses and visitors in Freeport that really just love living and being here. And so I want to make sure that you are updated along with this process. So you might not have gotten updates since you kicked off the process like around 6 months ago. I've been here for 4 months, so it's definitely about time. You can go to the next slide, Mandy. Thank you. So really what is kind of exciting to me to embark in this and help facilitate this planning effort is that it's really fulfilling the priorities that have been expressed in previous planning efforts. For example, the 2011 comprehensive plan, the vision statement is really pointing to some of the specific activities that would be included in a climate action plan, as well as the downtown vision, kind of narrowing in on some specific actions that would be typically included in a climate action plan. So the planning effort that FSAB and the Greater Portland Council of Governments and town staff are working to develop is really just creating a document and a structure and processes that reinforce priorities that the community has expressed over the years. Go ahead. And we are kind of closing in on starting the second phase of this process. And so the first process, GPCOG, the Greater Portland Council of Governments, was really conducting some baseline inventorying of two major categories. The first baseline is really about where Freeport is vulnerable to changing climate and the hazards like extreme storms, really, really hot days like we saw today that are super uncomfortable and can actually be dangerous, and other indirect hazards like more tick-borne diseases. There can be economic disruption, ocean acidification, especially in the Gulf of Maine. That's really dangerous for the important waterfront and the working waterfront in Freeport and Casco Bay. So all these kind of hazards really are impacting our community like they are many others in Maine and around the world. But certain people and places will kind of have the burden of these impacts more. And so the baseline inventory that GPCOG was conducting was to see who and where and what systems in Freeport are vulnerable or more vulnerable to these impacts. The other part of the baseline was conducting an emissions inventory. So they were looking at the greenhouse gas emissions that Freeport as a community, as a whole, kind of within the geographic boundaries of the town, where carbon pollution is emitted. And they chose 2019 as a baseline year, and they looked across all sectors, and I'll show you high-level results from that inventory. But that's all to say that the first phase of this process was really diving into the existing conditions and seeing, okay, where do we want to go from here now that we know a little bit about where we are? So the next phase where we are tonight is in thinking about setting targets to reduce emissions, those carbon pollution. Now that we know a little bit where it's coming from, we can kind of think about where we want to go. And so that's a really important process. I think in other planning efforts, there may be different ways to create a vision or set targets, but in climate action planning, it really is about tackling emissions at the source and setting a commitment to make changes over time to reduce emissions. We hope to be kind of wrapping up this process in the winter. So we have a couple of really busy months ahead of us in the fall. And I will make sure to keep y'all informed as we go through. So, setting our targets. What are we talking about, and really why do we need to set them? So, as I mentioned before, the changing climate is really having impacts across our community. More flooding, higher heat days, sea level rise. We have these impacts that we're experiencing now. Like today is a little unseasonable. My computer was giving me alerts that we were breaking records or something like that. And we can also model changes over time that really show us how life may be different in a couple of decades and a little bit more uncomfortable or dangerous for people. So the point of setting targets is, at its core, to reduce carbon pollution that Freeport contributes. The point of that is to protect the people and places of Freeport that make Freeport special and allow the community to thrive for future generations. These targets are really about setting clear, quantifiable goals to measure against over time and illustrate progress. It's also a way to support and empower all residents by signaling that the community, is investing in this effort and joining the state and our neighboring communities. That there's a way that they can contribute and be part of the solution right here in Freeport. I think a lot of residents and businesses may be empowered with that knowledge that they are working towards a goal that the community is behind. So like Mandy mentioned, we have been bringing this baseline information to the community for a couple of months, ever since we have been working with the Greater Portland Council of Governments. And we've tried to create kind of a variety of ways for people to get engaged and listen and absorb this information. The advisory board has been hosting lectures, like through their annual series. We had a well-attended workshop in the May. And then we've had surveying and an online interactive board where people are presented with the information, and then they're able to basically vote on this issue of targets, as well as provide input and for a variety of different topics related to this planning effort. We also had a display at the library where people could vote, and those, you can see they're kind of staggered over the course of when we've had the information, so since March to now, basically, to make sure that we're trying to reach people where they're at. The summer is busy. We just want to give people a chance to hear about the process and get involved. So a little bit of the high-level information that we have actually been presenting to the community based on the analysis provided to us by GPCOG. So this number kind of doesn't mean anything on its own. It's just the number that that GPCOG's analysis team has provided through a variety of data collection tactics and modeling scenarios and all the kind of nuts and bolts of how it works, and they're following best practices and a methodology that's used across the region. But if you can imagine, it's kind of like this number, 132,392, is equivalent to the emissions from burning 730 rail cars worth of coal every year. And so that's the emissions for 2019, which is the baseline year for this emissions inventory.
The community, Medi, or per person?
This is the total community, yeah. Per person, and we would really be in trouble. But no, this is for the whole community, and these comparisons are a little tricky, but in this box you can kind of see where Freeport fits in when you compare it annual emissions per person. So we are here at 15.13, and you can see that a couple of communities are lower, so that's like less emissions per person, per capita, which is, it's a little bit troubling, but so I wouldn't put too much faith in this, but it does give you a general spread of like, we're higher than the state, but we're lower than York. Just kind of an interesting way to kind of put that in context. If you have any questions about the methodology on that, I can.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of factors, like York, this is a destination where people come to. There's also a lot of commercial activity here. So the inventory that GPCOG conducted was really like zeroing in on the geographic boundaries, like what's going on in Freeport, and then using equivalencies and calculations to see what the emissions look like from that activity. What's that?
They're not measuring emissions in Freeport. They're categorizing activity and then doing equivalencies that come from some standardized.
Correct, correct. Yeah, so through different ways of understanding what fuel is being used and how much, and, you know, there's a lot of equivalencies and estimations involved. It's definitely not a perfect science down to the number, but following the kind of best practice methodology, this is where we are.
Many questions. They use traffic data in this too, correct? The vehicle data for trips to Freeport, yeah,
Yep.
so that would definitely factor in here too.
Yep, commercial, as well as residential, and, you know, movement from people coming into Freeport to shop and play and go to El Bean or Wolf's Neck.
Are they looking at farming?
Yes, I believe that was a sector included, but as far as the percentage of emissions that it is accountable for, it's pretty low. So if you go to the next slide, I think that might give us a little bit of a better picture. So very high level, the whole community, the residential, commercial activity, passenger vehicles, so cars and not trucks like for shipping or, you know, bigger vehicles, passenger vehicles, no matter if they're from residents or tourists or people commuting in. That was the highest percentage, the single source of emissions in Freeport at 36% of the total in 2019. And then commercial vehicles at 24%, making transportation with 62% of the total emissions, you know, by far the biggest category of first sectors emitting carbon pollution. And then home energy use and business energy use kind of coming in to make up most of the rest, with just a small amount from waste generation. And then as far as zeroing in on the emissions from municipal operations, largely mirroring the results of the community-wide, where the municipal fleet is making up the majority of emissions, largely from diesel use, and then buildings, pretty much the rest, largely from natural gas use. The streetlights, really accounting for like a tiny, tiny percent. And the municipal operations, those emissions are really only 1% of overall community emissions. So the rest are from the community, businesses, residents, tourists, et cetera. Any questions on this before we move on? I'm happy to answer at the end as well. Yeah.
Did they look at this and take the tourist factor out of it to see where we are as a town and just local?
Yeah, so that has been coming up a little bit in discussions, especially around transportation, is like, you know, what is the percentage that tourists are responsible for? Because that is such a big part of our emissions, you want to kind of be able to not lay any more blame or burden on residents for making changes they're not responsible for. So that's something we're definitely conscious of, but at this point, the data analysis that GPCOG is using, we're not able to separate them completely.
Right, we have 8,000 residents, how many cars is that anyway? Okay. Quite a bit.
Is there any quantification of the impact of solar on the municipal emissions?
On solar?
We have a solar array somewhere that produces a lot of our, would those numbers be significantly different if that solar array was not in place?
Was the solar in place before 2019 or after 2019?
I don't know the answer to that.
Before?
It was right, yeah, that's actually when we bought into it, was in 18 or 19. So that the town has a subscription to buy electricity from a solar field for
But it's
significant.
municipal accounts for 1%, so
Yeah.
how much lower do you?
No, but I'd be, as a resident taxpayer, like to know how solar affects what we do. As
Yeah.
I am as an individual property owner who has no impact on the climate either, but I'm very happy to be able to report my solar contributions.
Yeah.
It encourages others, encourages other towns, it encourages,
That data is readily available. We get the production that the town owns out of that solar farm and convert it to carbon emissions or greenhouse gas or
We
savings.
do that?
We can. It's very easy to do.
Well, if we could, that would be helpful for me,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
one department
absolutely.
counselor.
Great. Any questions on this before we can keep going? I want to be conscious of time. You guys are doing so good at moving things along. I don't want to slow you down. So when we presented this information to the community and all those different methods I mentioned, the library display, the workshop, survey, interactive online board, out of the people who chose to participate with those methods, which is about 137 total responses to this specific question, most people said they wanted to set more aggressive emissions reduction targets than the state. And we had information kind of putting those in context. What is the state doing? What are the other options? And you can see there's a variety. Some people said they don't really feel comfortable. They don't want to set emissions reduction targets for the town. A couple people said maybe do the same as the state. There was a range, but the vast majority, over 50%, said they would want to go higher than the state. Yeah.
So we got a population of 8,200 people, and you only got 137 that, how do we increase participation? Because it seems you've got a core group that's running your numbers, and you're not representing the whole community.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the challenge with a lot of the
Mailing or
planning
something, I don't know, wouldn't that be?
Yeah, like,
We'll have to figure out how to do that to get more people, yeah.
I agree. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, so I'm doing this process with Yarmouth as well, and I can say that it's, a comment that a lot of municipalities are having with participation, engagement, and, how can we make things accessible and like interesting for people? So I tried not to include a bunch of tables on these slides, and the same, I think we can be creative, and I would definitely, take any ideas I can from this group as far as how to reach people better and get a diverse range of responses, for sure. So with that information, the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board had some discussions to create a recommendation for an emissions reduction target, and they were considering the public feedback, however limited in diversity it could have been, as with every planning process. They were thinking about the public feedback, taking into consideration the different kind of scenarios modeled by using these different targets from GPCOG, thinking about what the community may prefer and be on board with, and with town and municipal resources and capacity. So what the advisory board ended up recommending through their process was reducing emissions 65% from a 2019 baseline by 2030, reducing them 85% from the 2019 baseline by 2040, and striving for net zero emissions by 2050. Additionally, with a municipal operations target of net zero by the year 2040. And so you can see that these targets are roughly in line with the International Climate Agreement targets, which are directly to the right. They are a little bit higher than the state's targets, although I will say that the state is starting to kind of actually achieve some of their targets ahead of time for metrics like heat pumps installed. So they're starting to adjust them to be a little bit more aggressive, which is interesting to see. But I think also notably that it is less aggressive than Yarmouth's target that has been set in 2022. So the advisory board was really trying to take into account what would work for Freeport and what would be realistic for the town leadership and community to strive for.
Maddie, question on the baseline. why did we pick 2019? The state picked 1990, and international looks like it's either 2016 or 2019. So what's magic about 2019?
There's nothing magic about 2019 except that it is pre-pandemic disruption where if we chose 2020 or 2021, we would see kind of different activity that would yield different results. And then 2022 data, I think, is not like all complete yet for making data sets out of. But the different baselines are pretty interesting. Like 1990 was a kind of an interesting choice for the state to make. But I think moving forward, communities at this step of the process are using 2019 data for now until 2022 or 23 becomes available and
I
consistent.
was thinking about going the other direction. If we go earlier, then it looks better. You know, we could say 80% from 1990 because that's easier to meet, even if it's the same,
We
the
worked
same
on
target.
we worked on this with GPCOG prior
Yeah.
to Medi coming. We struggled with what year to use data. We didn't want to use old data because then everyone would complain we're
Yeah,
using
yeah.
old data. You know, in Freeport, we've seen a decline by, you know, a good number of visitors coming to Freeport, which would impact it. But we did struggle using newer data because of the pandemic. So we're using this for a lot of data. I think you'll probably see 2019 also be a popular year in the comp plan data as well.
Thanks.
And so I think it's important just to note, and what the advisory board is thinking about with these targets is that, you know, you can set a target, but the point is to work towards it. And so setting this target is one thing, it's really signaling a commitment, but measuring progress towards the interim goals, and in the end, a kind of broad 2050 goal is where the rubber kind of meets the road. So the town can conduct updates to this data set, so when 2022 becomes available, they can do that, and, you know, maybe every couple of years just to measure the kind of baseline. But there's also, if we set targets, the modeling can kind of show us the key performance indicators, so the metrics that are kind of like proxies for achieving progress towards specific ends. So whether that's the number of electric vehicle registrations in town, the number of trees planted on town property, you know, the miles of multi-use paths, whatever is working towards our goals to reduce emissions and as well as enhance resiliency among the people and places of Freeport. These can be tracked on an annual basis, a lot of times with kind of free public data sets that someone in this position of sustainability coordinator or the advisory board or other town staff can keep track of to demonstrate progress, and that can help understand where to prioritize resources, where to celebrate success, like the state is doing ahead of time. So that's a little bit about how targets can be used to work backwards and narrow down into metric-specific targets to track every year. So I think where my brain goes is like, okay, the 65%, that's kind of a number. Like, what does it look like? How is life in Freeport going to change if we met that target? So GPCOG has provided a couple of samples or examples of what achieving targets looks like, and they chose transportation just because it is the highest emitting sector in Freeport. So if we were meeting the 65% emissions reductions by 2030 target, which is the recommendation, 23% of passenger cars would be electric by then. And we would have reduced the total vehicle miles traveled by 6.5%. So in 7 years, 1 out of every 5 cars is electric. And again, that's including like visitors, so passenger cars from tourists visiting, using the L.O. Bean charging station, whatever, like, it doesn't really matter whose car it is, but a fifth of the cars are electric. I mean, when I see these numbers, that starts to kind of make it visual and help me understand what it means and if it's feasible or not. So I think it's important to note that these changes and other ones that the Climate Action Plan would be kind of tackling are leveraging market transformation. So a lot of companies creating cars in the US are going electric, and so this might not actually be that hard to achieve in 10 years. It's also supporting in-progress regional and local projects that have been working on this for a long time, like multi-use paths and walkability and bikeability and things like that. People are already working on that, and so it's not all on this climate action plan to meet this target. This is really kind of an effort that is, spread out over a lot of passionate and engaged groups in town. And then I think it's also worth to note, in the analysis, we can see that these two metrics, for example, are really only slightly ahead of what we would see if we were following the state targets. I think the state would say, okay, if we're going to meet the state goals, we need to have 21% electric vehicles. So it's really just kind of a bump up in some respects from the state's targets. Another example of kind of the data that we can expect to see if we are choosing an emissions reduction target is drilling down into a specific number of, for example, heat pumps installed. So for some metrics, we can actually get the number per year in a range of time that we need to get to track progress towards the goal. Most of these are kind of heavier on implementing between now and 2030. And then it kind of tapers off after that until from 2030 to 2050. So kind of thinking that the easier stuff will happen, and then we'll kind of encounter some harder to do things, like it's harder to electrify giant commercial buildings, like hopefully some newer solutions and more funding sources and other things like that will come down the line in a couple of decades that we can tackle those really hard to do things. But this is, again, another example of some of the metrics that we have access to tailor to Freeport and our emissions reductions targets to track progress. So high level, I hope that wasn't too long. The problem that this planning effort is trying to address is changing climate is impacting the people and places of Freeport, their health, well-being, safety, ability to be resilient and bounce back after disasters or disruption. And the solution that we're tackling is setting emissions reductions targets to make a change and address a changing climate at the source, which is reducing the reliance on fossil fuels. And I think it's also important to think about this plan as a process in which to leverage federal funding, which is becoming more and more abundant, but is complicated to access. And I think that in some ways having a plan and having targets and really being able to drill into the priorities that we need to tackle will help leverage some of this funding that we can use to do these things. So I definitely want to answer your questions if you would like that and have time. But my question is, what can we do next, the advisory board and myself, to help facilitate any decision-making in the process of setting emission reduction targets? There are specific questions we can answer. When could we come back to do a deeper dive or anything like that?
Since my hand is up.
I think so.
This isn't me, but this is the question that I confront as a counselor, to some extent on this council. But my question to you is, to what extent have your emission targets taken into consideration other processes or other technologies that will reduce the effect of climate change? The ones that come to mind are nuclear, carbon extraction, which is on NPR this week. So you go out into the community, and whether you're with Freeport Can or whether we're talking about sustainability, all of which I believe in, you're making your own personal decisions. But when the feedback or the resistance you get is from people who say, you're investing a lot of putting all your money on one horse, and that horse may not be the one that actually solves the problem. That horse may be dead long before the solution occurs because Occidental does it, or the local nuclear power stations are funded. And what you're doing, this is the argument, is extracting resources from other technologies. You picked a winner, and you've left the other technologies in the dust. Is there an answer to that the counselor like me who wants to talk to Counselor Chip over there could readily give?
I mean, I think that it's a very interesting challenge to be tackling, and one that I'll say, you know, from this process, this isn't committing to anything, you know, legally at this point. We're not saying like we'll always be for heat pumps no matter what, no matter if there's a better solution out there. You know, I think the climate action plan is meant to be the first step, and the plan itself is meant to be updated. So as technologies or funding sources or community priorities shift, those would be captured in updates to the plan. So, you know, we can make progress towards, you know, targets that and strategies that we think work now, and then, you know, if we find out that they are not working later, that would be incorporated in other iterations of this effort. It's meant to be kind of long-term planning. But yeah, no, that's a great question. I think.
Can I add to that
Yeah,
answer
sure.
also? So this, you know, I used to work for a international nonprofit that was dealing with this back in the early 2000s, and it was really about, you have your principles, your goals, your strategies, and your actions, and you actually have to set some goals so that then you can figure out what strategies and actions you can use. And these goals, they can shift. Obviously, Maine is already changing one of their goals because they're ahead of the game on something, and granted, they were using earlier data. So what we need to do is set some sort of target, and then GPGOG, I agree, the data is not complete, and it will never be complete. So we have quantitative data, we have qualitative data, and we have to do our best job that we can with that, because that's you know, what we have. And that's what the International Climate Agreement is based on. So they use that. But we are unique here in Freeport. And we can, to the point of what does the solar take out of the carbon emissions. You know, we can look at specific things as we're making our strategies, and we can look at the goal, that target goal we set, and then start to model things that are very specific for us. And GPCOG may say, you know, this many cars we need, but we might find, oh, wait, we're doing this solar thing here, or we've educated the community, or we have another one of these great deals on heat pumps for residents, and or maybe we're putting in new EVs, and we have the other downtown vision of wanting to have lesser driving within a mile of downtown. So it really integrates with other stuff that we're starting to do. So if we reduce, you know, some of that tourist traffic into electric cars, we have a unique opportunity to jump farther than another town that doesn't have that tourist thing. So it is very complex, but that's where we kind of have to, you know, drill into the details without getting in the weeds. So I just wanted to add that. Yeah.
So I've heard some comments come to me, and you'll learn up here, I'm going to tell you how, like as it is. So, but people are concerned they're going to force them into electric vehicles. So that myth, we gotta kill that, because we had people here 3 or 4 meetings ago testifying that they were scared to death about electric vehicles. So for whatever reason, that's out there. So we gotta solve that problem. One that convinced me was adding the insulation. We looked at making our buildings more tighter, and it makes a lot of sense in Maine. When we get hot days, it's cooler. In the wintertime, it saves a lot of energy. That's, I think, where we can get a lot of the people. You know, you have a small group you talk to, but I think there's a lot of people that want to help, but they really don't know, you know, say, hey, put more insulation in your attic, or place your windows, or the heat pump or something. That's, I think, the messaging we need to go out. The other ones that people have come to me, said, you know, well, they're going to ban all of our chainsaws and our gas-operated lawnmowers and stuff. That's the rumor that's out there. So that, again, you know, it's interesting. My neighbor, who I never thought would buy an electric lawnmower, brought it over to my house and showed me how wicked that thing was working. Now, granted, he doesn't have a big lawn, but it worked well. So for a crusty old guy like me, I'm saying, hey, okay, so the technology, I think, to your point, Ed, is changing. That's going to change people's focus. And I think The message is that we're gonna not shove that stuff down your throat, but we're gonna give you opportunities and methodologies to maybe get to a better place. And that probably would go a long ways.
I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, that's our job, right? That's your job as town councilors, and that's our job as an advisory board, is to look at all this data, the stuff that they don't want to look at, or, whatever, and start to figure out ideas and communication for them so that they can do it. So you're absolutely right. And maybe an EV car isn't right for everyone. And, and they do the data on that, and sometimes if you're not a big driver and you're driving a 2011 Subaru like I am, maybe, and I don't commute anywhere, it's better to keep that going for a while, So there's all sorts of different ways to get at it. And letting people understand what is low-hanging fruit for them, that they can get at, that they can understand, and then they get excited about it because you realize, like, oh, that worked, now my house is warmer, now I step up to the next thing. Yeah, did you want to?
I love this conversation because I think we finally reached Daryl got close, in my view. But you get to the point where, okay, let's say reducing emissions is the thing to do for now, and we should focus on and get it done, and you've got some targets. But we go from the targets to the implementation, and it's in that moment that you lose people. And, I'll give Freeport Can a lot of credit because they came in with some ideas about how to actually implement. And I know they've been talking to you. I don't mean to separate. I don't know what the connections are, but you're together, and that's cool. But so, things run through your mind like, could you have a parking lot for EVs that, is close to downtown? If you're in an EV, you can park down there. That doesn't tell anybody they have to have an EV, but it says if you have an EV, you get a perk. Freeport Can has electric appliances, whether they're chainsaws or blowers or other things in mind, but there's a problem with getting them in places where people can get to them. How do we solve who is it that solves those problems? That takes a good idea and makes it available to the guy Daryl's talking about, who just bought something that he's showing Daryl really works on his lawn. What's that step?
Well, what's interesting is that's the word of mouth, right? So the more we can educate, that we've got, what was it, 136 that answered the survey. We've had the Efficiency Maine lecture that we had this year was one of our highest attended lectures, and then the one that GMRI put on, which was the coastal resiliency. So people do want to know, and if they can come out and learn, and then they can tell their neighbor or show, that does help. But we do need, I don't know if it's just a mix of resources. We have stuff on the website, but people don't want to go to the town website, so then we went out and we did tables, we put a thing at the library. We're trying to try a bunch of different things, so any suggestions are good.
But you're doing things that are going to convince people that your take on this is correct, and that,
No.
What do you?
We're trying to get, some of the questions asked are what, you know the survey probably better now than I do, right? Like, what measures might you take, and it lists ones that you can check off, in your home that you'd be able to do, things like insulation or heat pumps or things like that. So it was a wide variety of questioning. So it wasn't just we were on a information gaining process as well. We wanted to find out what people feel they can do, what they care about, what they don't know about yet.
Can I have one more second? So, my understanding is that this council was convinced by Freeport Can to invest in electric appliances. And that Freeport Can ran into a logistical problem. Bob's here, and he told me about it the other day, and that is that there aren't people who will take care of them and get them out to the people who would use them and stuff like that. So whose job is it in this town for those kinds of practical problems to be addressed? Is it the Sustainability Committee to come to the council with recommendations? Is it Freeport Can to come and say, we're running into this problem? I don't know the answer to that, but it strikes me that if we've invested $75,000 in electric appliances that aren't purchased or being used, that we've missed an opportunity. Both
Is
by...
that the program for the heat pumps? Is that
No,
what-
that's the one for, Freeport Can was going to produce things like electric blowers and chainsaws and other electrical appliances that people could use. And it's just hard to find ways to get them out to the people when you buy them. So that's a practical problem.
Right.
But, Freeport can't solve it on its own. Is sustainability focused on those things? Do you have ideas?
We're not
Should we
involved
all
in
get
that.
together, huh?
We're not involved in that one, so I can't speak to that
I
one
know, but why
specifically.
not?
Well, I don't know about it, but.
I'm teasing, but it's like,
Yeah, I think if you have a large enough suite of opportunities, but you have to be cognizant of there are not many installers that are available for solar panels right now. I mean, the pandemic did change a lot of things. And the same with the heat pumps. I know there are issues in being in line to get those things put in. So I think it's important to not just rely on only those things. So, other, insulation, Efficiency Maine offers rebates on insulation. They offer that like $200 worth of, caulk and everything annually. So we were trying to get the word out about that kind of stuff too. So I think the wider array of information of what people can do is helpful in that. I mean, we can't hire the contractors or magically make them appear. So we have to be cognizant of that. So we can't make our recommendation and not have it be feasible. So that's important to do our due diligence in there. But I think if we have a large enough suite of opportunities to get at it, then we can, and people can find their way in. And things will change. Technology is changing. Contractors coming to Maine will likely change if there's a need like that. I imagine people will. So that's where, constantly reassessing every year and then setting your targets and being able to shift as need be is important.
So Mehdi, you asked for next steps. Can you clarify for the council? So we made a commitment and funded working on a climate action plan. So we've been working with GPCOG. We have all this baseline data that they're putting together. And we're going to have a plan that's going to take the data and we're going to identify our goals and implementation strategies as a community to make all sorts of efforts, from Daryl's neighbor and the leaf blower or not the leaf blower, the mower, other people choosing to do different things. So as part of that plan, we have been asked by GPCOG to set these targets because these are going to feed into what some of those goals and implementation strategies might be. So, Mehdi, can you clarify a little bit how this is going to be used for the council? Timeliness on making a decision, because we do need this for the plan, and why this is so important for the plan, so that we can get to, if they feel like they're ready to make a decision, if we need to get a little more community input, or what they want to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that since we had hoped to get the planning effort concluded by December, that puts us on a little bit of a fast track, and we've done a lot of the hard work of collecting and analyzing the data, or GPCOG has done that. So setting these targets would really help us dive into that data and get at some of these, like the 6.5%, the 23% electric, all those like little bits of data that help us design implementation strategies. So if we don't have those targets in the fall, it just kind of drags things out, and we're not kind of creating a data-driven plan. So it would slow down the process. And so I think that we're coming tonight just to see where you all stand on this discussion and what you feel you need to make an informed decision as a body.
One more, so before that, so the process was on, the scheduling there was to end roughly at the end of December. We do have another workshop that we had tentatively planned it in October, and linking some of our sustainability series, the lecture, to it. So that's on there. It will probably get moved up into November now, but that would be the priority action planning workshop. So once you've set the targets, then you bring the community back in. So yes, any ways to get more people into that process. And that's when you start setting what are the priority actions to get to those targets. So that would be sometime in November, hopefully, so that we could stay on track and finish with our contract with GPCOG by the end of the year.
So that's sort of my question, I guess, on the timing. I wasn't comfortable just sort of slopping it on the agenda and asking for a vote tonight, because I think, to Daryl's point, I think there are a lot of people that would really benefit from participating in the discussion or knowing that it's happening. So my question, I think, for the council is really, is this something we want to put on another agenda with the intent of voting on it and encouraging people to show up at a council meeting to discuss it? Or is this something we think deserves a workshop of its own so we can really dive into all of the details? And that might conflict with the workshop schedule that you have, because I thought maybe we could do that together, but if your workshop is really on the action steps we would need to take after we adopt the targets, that almost sounds like 2 workshops, which seems like it would be tough to get people out for.
Yeah, so I just will mention that the workshop that was held in May, right after I came on, that was the workshop we held at FCS that had a whole kind of station on this. And, I mean, it was well-attended. I thought it was crowded, but, you know, like we mentioned before, it's challenging to get a diverse group of people in the room to come out on a weeknight in the evening, like the, you know, it is challenging. And I think that we had advertised that workshop as, you know, we're getting started, we're setting our priorities, what do we think about targets, and it made up a large part of our presentation at that workshop. But so I'll just mention that that was a big part of the first workshop in May.
Darryl?
As of tonight, I couldn't support, I would vote against the plan. I'll tell you why, because I've had a lot of constituents come to me and say, we're scared to death. So I guess the messaging needs to be, if we adopt this plan, let's say in November, of what you have for percentages now, that does not set the policies moving forward on how we're going to achieve it. And to Ed's point, is if new technology comes down the road, we're going to be open to that. People that have come to me are scared to death that there's one plan, that you're going to go in, you're taking away their rights, your lawnmower's going to go away. I'm not going to be able to cut my chainsaw or burn my wood. These are the comments that have come to me. So I want to share that with you because I think it's unfair to say, you know, if you don't hear that. So if we can solve that, and I think we can solve it, and I think it may be some mailing or something, and I don't know if a workshop here will do that, but, you know, we always say, what is the challenge to get the word out to all the citizens here, and maybe we can get our heads together and come up with some way to make that happen.
I like the idea of having a survey and send it out to every household that's got a self-mail address with, you know, to the town so that we, or whoever, so that we get an answer from more than 1% of the population. I mean, that's really where,
I think it's,
because I see the same people in here every week.
yeah. Well,
Everyone
that's-
else is not, I don't know if they're not worried about it or if, or what they're thinking, or they're just too busy and they get home and they're tired and I just can't do one more thing, you know, they're all. So, having a survey that has a lot of different questions on it might, and get it out to the town, I think that would go a long way.
And I think what the points that you brought up, what people are asking you, because they don't know. So they're asking all these things, and we don't necessarily know those concerns, what they're asking, you know. So and the more information like that you can give us, then we can target the survey so that it's really addressing what they're worried about, so that we can clarify that, we can make it more understandable to them, so that the thing that they're worried about, which may not have anything to do with the targets, you know, is not going to be, we're not going to take it away or anything, then that can, you know, calm anyone's worries. Yeah, so that's great, thank you.
Now, I do have another, why do you need the council's answer to that? Why can't you just work to those targets and say, hey, we'd like to hit these targets? Go to GBCOG and say, well, whatever, why can't you just work to those targets and say, here's how we can achieve this, instead of having like a formal statement from the council? I mean, it's just a question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Caroline, were you?
You guys are elected to make decisions on behalf of your constituents, and so I think they want to, they don't just want to make something up, they want some commitment from somebody in the town that they can set this goal. Now, if you're saying, I guess you could say, by vote, like you want to go along with the survey results, you could do that, but I think somebody needs to make a decision as to where we want to head as the community of Freeport, and that would be you guys.
Well, I guess the question is, if they said 65, if they just went to GBCOG, we're going to just work towards this goal, and the survey came back and saying, hey, we only want to go to 21% instead of 65%, what's the difference? Other than it alleviates a lot of maybe the issues or whatever, or maybe the town comes back and say it's 85%. Okay, we can step this up, but you don't, I don't know why you can't work towards that goal. What do you need? A statement saying, oh yeah, the council says this.
I think they want someone to set a goal to show that we're serious about it. I mean, some of these things are gonna take money from the town if we're gonna invest in, maybe an EV charges isn't a good example, but bikes and trails to reduce vehicle miles traveled, or
Well,
incentivize, do different things, or a fund program like Energize Freeport that Freeport can establish, I think.
we did that, we didn't have the goals, and we are working on building those trails. We have a whole plan. Before this even came into account, we have a whole comprehensive plan to build multi-use paths. We're building bridges that have paths across them for this very reason, right? I mean, we're already doing those things. And it had nothing to do with these goals. Well, it sort of did, but it helps us achieve the goal, but I guess I'm missing the point of, you can work with GPCOG, right? And you're saying 65, well, let's work with that. I'm just asking the question. I mean,
I think it's similar to the process we went through with downtown, right? It's one thing to say there's a group that we appointed, some committee that wants to do some stuff with downtown. It's another thing for us to say, this is our town's vision of what we want our downtown to be. So without our imprimatur, without our stamp on it, it just becomes some committee, and not to diminish the work that you're doing, but it's not the town's goal.
Well, I get that, but let's see, I also thought.
And it's important to get a goal, I think, that you guys have a really hard job. You have to take those phone calls from all your constituents who are a wide variety of viewpoints and take that information. And I think you can bring that to the table to help set a goal that balances the need, which we can't when we're just going off a survey of 137. It's
Right,
really
well, that's the
hard.
problem.
Right,
I mean,
right.
That's the issue.
Yeah, Daryl.
My memory serves me right. When we funded GPCOG to come up with a plan, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think what I was taking that as, that would help us to have a plan that was done, adopted by multiple communities, number one, which I thought was important. But number two, if we had adopted a plan, then we could go for federal funding for grants. So I think that's probably where we, as the elected official, have to say, okay, we want to move forward.
Okay, so
And just by saying what those numbers are initially, doesn't say how we're going to get there, but we're going to say, yeah, we're behind lowering that. Please move forward, come up with another plan. Hey, if you get some funding, hey, we're going to love you, and move that forward. So I think that's how I understood it, but maybe that was wrong.
I think that's what we're saying all along, right? Like, we're not voting on how to achieve that. We're saying, yeah, it'd be great if we could reduce by 2030 to 65%, and the town's behind it. That's literally all I think that you guys want. So if we're in agreement, I think that we could do that
In the
in
next-
relatively short order.
The next community meeting, which tentatively in October, which we would encourage you all to come to, will help us determine, okay, these are our goals, so what kind of things do we need to do to get there? And then we'd set how we're gonna do it. And there might be multiple ways, because like, maybe I need to insulate my house, and maybe you want your own EV charger, so that meeting will help us. Setting these goals will help us look at reasonable implementation strategies at the next
So
meeting.
can I offer a suggestion to kind of drive this in a direction here? I don't think we're going to vote on it tonight, right? We all agree that we want more input. One of the things we have coming up is that we've got a town manager search underway, and we hope that within the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, we may have some finalists that we want the public to meet. So we might be convening some group of a wide swath of residents to come out. That might be a good time to say, hey, while you're here, here's an interesting discussion we can have about setting goals. So that could be, and if we can't do that within the next, where are we now, beginning of September, if we can't do that before the end of October, then we'll just put it on a council agenda and say, on October, whatever, we're going to be talking about this. If you're interested, please show up and participate in the discussion, and then we can aim to vote on it that night. Does that sound reasonable?
I think Chip had a great idea. Here's my recommendation. We adopt the plan that they have, then you send out a community survey, so everyone has input.
Just adopt the goals. We're not-
Just adopt the goals.
Just goals.
Okay, then you do a mailing to everyone in town, say we've adopted the goals, but here's some of the strategies. What's your idea on getting there? Then I think we can quell some of the misinformation out there of where we're going. what a great opportunity to go out and get feedback back, and we may come up with ideas that we never thought about. Right.
Yeah. Oh, may I
Yeah,
say?
Mandy?
Just, I think that's actually a really good way to go because we're trying to, it's not a negative constrained thing. It's like, we're trying to get people excited. Like, here's our goal, you know, it's like the sports analogy. This is the line you have to cross with the ball or whatever. And I feel like if we just have another discussion, we might just get those same 137 people. And that's my worry. And I think if you create this celebration and excitement and we're well on our way, we can mark again the things that we've already done that, you know, even since 2019 that are setting us on this path, then we might get other people, and taking in your advice of what people are saying to you, we may get more responses in that self-mailer. I think that's actually a really good way to go.
I have no objections to a mailer, but I would have to ask you for about $4,000
Oh.
because that's what it costs to mail the entire town.
Jake? Sorry.
Well, I just think we already have a meeting set for November, right? You guys already have a plan, or October or somewhere in there where we're going to come together and talk about it. So I think if we started
October 5th.
publicizing now, we might be able to get away from the mailer idea. You know,
Yeah.
you could post at Bow Street, you know, I don't know. I think I love the idea of a mailer, but it's expensive. So I would think if we do goals and then start promoting that event, we'll get good results.
Yeah, Chip?
I think if we did a mailer, we could do a couple of things with that. One is this. One, maybe figure out how to communicate to people so we don't have to do mailers, because right now, we get a lot of people in here that say, hey, I didn't know about this, even though we have. So maybe it's a comprehensive mailer that we do.
So like a mailer, but not just about climate.
Not just about climate change, but
Yeah. Ed, you've been waiting.
I think communication is already something we've identified as a serious weakness in the
description's going
town.
out,
So anything we can do to further that thinking would be great to use this issue for. In addition to all the things, which this is, I think, great conversation, if we could add to the communication, the steps that we have taken that have resulted in emissions reductions, and we could identify the current opportunities that are available for people who want them. And then, I don't know if we can, but develop some kind of a clearinghouse or strategy to assist them in getting from their desire. You know, it's one thing to adopt a goal. It's another thing to buy a heat pump. It's another thing to buy an electric car. It's another thing to buy the chainsaw or the blower. But, you know, or insulate, whatever the right things are that are currently available that help us and give a measure. There's Project Drawdown does some of this stuff where it measures for the world what would happen if you bought into this particular effort. If we could do that for Freeport, it would be amazing, you know. So if you have an EV charger, it reduces the emissions this much in Freeport. Gets us this much closer to our goal.
Right.
I don't know if that's practical, but it would be
But some of that, yeah.
amazing if we could do that, because then the people would have a measured incentive available to them, and then they can make their own decisions about how much time, effort, and money they want to spend.
So I'm going to suggest Darrell's idea.
Okay.
All right, which is we set the goals, then we do a mailer and as much communication as we can to talk about, all right, we set these goals, how do we get there? And that's where we talk about, no, we're not taking away your chainsaws and lawnmowers, but what other ideas do we have? So in order to kind of move it forward, we have 2 meetings in October so far. There's one on the 3rd, one on the 17th. So I'd suggest, why don't we put it on our agenda for the 3rd, which is about a month from now, give us time to get people aware of what's going on, say, come to our meeting on the 3rd, that's when we're going to do the goals. After that, we're going to talk a lot about what that really means. And then we may also have that town manager meet and greet kind of thing happening in October as well, which will give us another opportunity to talk about that. Does that sound reasonable?
So you don't want to put all the things in that communication that will help people decide what they could do.
Hang on. So, sorry, Ed, go ahead.
I described a group of issues that you
Yeah.
might put, did you?
A combined mailer, yeah,
Did you mean to exclude them from that effort?
yeah. After the 3rd. We could do that, but just do it after the 3rd.
We have a donation request mailer that we send typically in November, early December. If we could nudge the
Bump that up.
clerk to bump it up. We could maybe put this and some other things in there, but again, these would be set, so I hear you saying it'd be more education and outreach and getting ideas, not necessarily changing these goals, just trying to get some general feedback, which you could then use as part of your data collection for the plan. It might bump the ultimate final product out a little bit, but if we get better input, I think a better plan's worth waiting an extra month.
Yeah. Bob, did you want to comment?
Yes, I would, please. Bob Stevens. So I'm a member of the board and also involved with Freeport Can. And this has been a great discussion up here. You know, it's the first time that you've seen a result of the effort that you funded with GPCOG and all the hours that have been put in by board members and interested citizens. You need to set goals. You're convinced, facts are convincing that actions have to be taken at whatever local, national, state level, international is possible to actually slow down the heating of the planet. Sure, we want to make our vulnerabilities not having horrible effects on us, so we can take steps to mitigate. But the ultimate aim here is to give goals that can be pursued locally, because that's all we can control. We can't control the development of nuclear energy, but we can do things, and we're not going to mandate. You're not going to mandate things. You're going to use what knowledge is brought to you and the leadership you have to say, these are things we can do in Freeport. And it's going to, as Darrell pointed out, give the opportunity for funding that's available. We're not telling people what to do. We're saying this is one way to do some of these things. You're trying to do it. When we were in here asking for the ARPA funds, I think it was Jake who thought about the idea of, instead of buying blowers for everybody and electric lawnmowers, we set up a library. We could loan it out. Well, Caroline has been working on that, trying to implement that, but in fact, the library is unable to get involved. It can't be worked out at Public Works. These are great ideas, but we're going to need more commitment from the council to do some of these things. Chip, you raised the tourist question, all right? That's an important question, because that may very well involve you spending more money to get COG to do the kind of survey that is done at different times of the year to figure out when that passenger and commercial transportation is taking place. And you're going to have to sit down with, all that tourist money is so important to the town, but it creates effects that we have to figure out some way to offset. And that's going to mean sitting down with LL Bean and others and saying, hey, look, we know that that's important to bring those people here to town. It's important for the town. But can we do some things together? Can you take some actions to help us that can produce some offset for things like that? Can money go into more bicycle paths that people, in fact, if they have safe roads, can use? The average trip is 1.6 miles. People are starting to buy bikes, but they don't feel safe on the roads. Now, that means you have to look at the roads and you have to make efforts to try them safer for people. You know, this is quite a challenge you have. This is a goal. This isn't how it's going to happen, but we need goals and you need to set them.
To your point, though, we spend money on a lot of other things, but we haven't spent one dime towards, well, maybe we spent some to get the plan for the path from West Street down to, but we haven't spent any ARPA money or anything else on doing the actual paths around town. And we've talked about it, I've brought it up, but it all gets, oh no, we're gonna do this, or we're gonna do
Right.
that. So I get frustrated when,
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
when we're not doing that, that helps
Sure.
everybody.
Yeah.
And your plan, with Freeport County, we spent $40,000 to help 15, 20 people, where this helps the whole town, if the whole town wants to choose. So the priority is,
Chip, you're right. In fact, we've been unable to get people to come forward and apply for those funds. Freeport Housing Trust may very well do it and use some of it, but anything that happens that in fact reduces emissions and substitutes something for it, no matter how many people it helps, does accomplish something. Sure, we want to do the most we can for the most people.
I think
And
we're all on
that-
the same
there's
page.
one
right?
way to-
We want to do the bike paths because they're helpful, they're actions that would support these goals. So we'll put the goals on our agenda, and then we'll have a really good discussion around what are some other things we can do, and they might include, let's get these bike paths built, and 100 other things that we can probably do. So I think we're all,
I think you got a
more or less in
plan.
the same direction.
We got a plan.
We got a plan. We got a plan. We'll refine the plan as we go, but we got a plan.
Do we need to push it off till October, or
My only
what's
reason,
your thought on going to October versus like next meeting?
instead of next meeting,
Yeah.
just because I want to make sure that Daryl and the rest of us have a chance to go out and raise awareness that we're going to be setting the goals. So, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Maddie and Andy and Bob and your groups that you're representing for all the work that you've done to get us here. I know it's not just an easy thing to prepare 6 slides and show up at a council meeting. It's months and months of work, so I appreciate that. And we're thrilled to have you here in Freeport.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to officially meet all of you, and I look forward to our next discussion. I'll make sure Caroline and I chat about next steps.
Perfect.
I'll unplug my computer.
Yep,
Yeah,
yours
you're good to go.
unplugged.
Yeah. Thanks again. All right. Thanks for that discussion, counselors. So we are back to our other business, back to the first item, which I think is going to be relatively quick because we dealt with a lot of it, but discussion of the August 22nd workshop recommendations from the Housing Committee. So I'll turn it over to John, see if there's anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, in
It sounds
20
Sam.
seconds, not 20 minutes. We already covered a lot of what was a result of that August 22nd workshop, which was to create the Court District Working Group, and that's really the thrust of it. The recommendations from the Housing Committee were bold and assertive to try and spark the conversation, to get some action, which I think we got, and to encourage some broad thinking about how to rewrite some of the things that are actually systemically holding us back from realizing what may very well be some really good projects in downtown. So that's the list. The list of recommendations is in your packet if anybody wants to go a little bit further. And I have not forgotten at all about my fellow councilor Pillsbury reminding me that the affordability metrics need to be front and center on those recommendations. So we're working on that.
Councilor Bradley?
Yeah, I have a question which comes up. I have a question which comes up frequently these days in District 2 on the water, wherever you are, and that is that Tuesday meeting was in part response to the dilemma created by 22 Main, and we kept it off of the discussion. But is there anything going on that we know about or the public should know about, 22 Main progress or application or development that we can explain tonight?
The Board of Appeals reversed the decision, and we have not been notified that it's been appealed to court.
Is there an appeal deadline?
It's 45 days, so they are past the deadline.
And has anybody had any communication with the developer with respect to that project?
Limited.
Has it had anything to do with whether he intends to continue?
I don't believe he intends to continue, but again, it's beyond us now. If anything, it would be court. I don't know if there's 45 days. I don't know if there's any leeway, like.
Has he told the town he's not going to do the project?
We do not believe he's going, yes, he's not doing the project that we're aware of.
Okay. And has Mosier approached, I'm asking you questions that are being asked me
Yes.
by people who have bits and pieces of information that they can't stitch together. Is Mosier come to us and asked us whether we're interested in that property?
I have not heard from the Mosier family,
Has anybody in town heard from the Mosier family about that property?
not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Questions about the housing workshop? All right, moving on. You guys are up. Thank you for your patience, especially as we rejiggered the agenda. I think it was a worthwhile discussion. I'm glad we were able to have it earlier, but apologize that made you guys stick around later.
I think Matt just got back from Iceland, so he's in a tougher boat than most of us.
So it's like
While they're
3
setting
a.m.
up, I'll go ahead and kick us off. I know it's a busy night and a lot of ground's been covered, so we'll keep moving. Nice segue, that workshop on August 22nd. Good discussion about housing, and lucky enough tonight to have a project that we can hopefully look at and support that can help solve some of the issues here in Freeport. Brett Richardson, Executive Director of the Freeport Economic Development Corporation. FEDC's role when it comes to TIF requests are to be a gatherer of information and to take the first look at a TIF request and then make a recommendation to council. So that's what we're doing tonight. Lucky enough to have Tim Gooch, the developer, and Matt Peters from the Freeport Housing Trust, who will be working on the project together with us tonight. They'll give you a good overview. But the reason that we're approaching it the way we have, which is, I think, a fairly abbreviated time frame from the way that TIFs have been looked at in the past, is that these gentlemen have an opportunity to put an application into Maine Housing, which would allow the ability to attract funding to Freeport to support affordable housing for individuals 55 and older. So, we're working on this as quick as we can so that they can meet their deadline by the end of the month. And while they're not going to hit the TIF request as part of that scoring process, the town can put in place a TIF district if we wish to before the Maine Housing Committees will make their decision. So it will have some influence there. So really tonight, we want to share the information, get an overview for you all, communicate FEDC's findings relative to the TIF policy and the public benefits of the project, and then really gather your feedback. To see where we're at as a council, and if we can, to determine next steps in a timeline to get these gentlemen an answer so that we can get some housing in the ground here in Freeport. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and he'll give us an overview of the project.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, my name is Matt Peters, the Executive Director of the Freeport Housing Trust. Thanks for making time on your agenda tonight to hear both about the development and our next steps and actions that we look to the council to help with. So I'll just start with some introductions. Most of you know me and the Housing Trust, but just to summarize, the Housing Trust is a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to provide and support the addition of affordable housing in Freeport and adjacent communities. We own 8 properties, totaling 183 apartments. Most recently, we completed the acquisition of Quarry Ridge, which was 36 apartments 34 apartments over by Bow Street Market. That property, actually, the council did approve affordable housing TIF to support the acquisition and work up there for 50% of the property taxes. And then the last development that was completed was back in 2012, 55-plus community Oakleaf Terrace, or Oakleaf 2, which is adjacent and behind Oakleaf Terrace, the other one-story buildings. This is the 3-story building in the back of the property. And again, the council at that time supported an affordable housing TIF of 50% to help with the operations of that property. So Tim Gooch is Tim here, a man in the computer. He is working in partnership with the trust to be co-developers in doing this work. Tim's role will be leading the development portion from now until the construction's completed. So all of that effort and the trust will be supporting him like today, as well as through a bunch of different application processes, oversight, and then ultimately, after the building, we start construction on the building. The trust will be the majority owner in that property with a buyout option over time. So, like most of the properties that the trust owns, we do operate them for the benefit of the community and for the residents. And so I think that's a big piece of value that the trust brings to the table around making sure that affordable housing stays affordable over the long term. Okay. So we're here to talk to you about a property called Varney Heights. It's located across Varney Road from Varney Square, which is 30 apartments that the Housing Trust currently owns. And this parcel is adjacent to the former automotive site that recently changed hands to Dutton's. Is it the... The proposal is for 42 apartments in one building, one 3-story building. We're going to be using a similar building that Tim just completed up in Augusta. There's a lot of reasons to do this, primarily for cost efficiency, for reduction of risk from construction management and pricing standpoint, as well as reduction in architecture fees. All of these things come together. We know it's hard enough to build one building, and so it's nice to be able to leverage that work that went into that one building already to reduce risk and make sure that we can continue to build affordable housing by working together and using that previous project as a project experience. So here's a picture of that building, and if anybody's up in Augusta, it's right there. You can drive through and go through the circle and see the property. Is it just a plug? Yeah. There's just some interior shots. So the big benefit of the development is that we've all been talking about gaps in our affordable housing infrastructure. We have a wait list at Oakleaf 2, which is a very similar property to what this new building would be. And so for our 1-bedrooms, our wait list is a little over 30 households, and for our 2-bedroom, I think it's in the mid-teens right now. And that doesn't mean all of those households will convert into being future residents for a number of various reasons. People's life circumstances change. But for this one snapshot in time, that's a pretty good indicator of where we are at with our current demand. And also, the apartments that we would be bringing online, you do have to make a certain amount of, your income has to be above a certain threshold in order to be able to afford the rent. These apartments are not what we call rental-assisted apartments. We have 2 properties in town that are rental-assisted apartments, Oakleaf Terrace and Brookside. I do want to make that distinction that if somebody comes in with a very limited income, $1,000 a month, Social Security, these apartments are not going to fit that gap, unfortunately. Those subsidies were more prevalent in the mid-'80s through HUD and other federal programs. The program that we will be using in order to be able to construct the building requires that we charge rents that include utilities and maintenance and professional property management. 1-bedroom apartment would be about $1,300 a month or less, and then a 2-bedroom would be about just under $1,600 a month. And there'll be 2 tiers. That's the most of the rent that we would charge, and then there's kind of another one that's about 80% of that. Nice benefit of this building is that it's 3 stories, but it would be elevated. And so you wouldn't have to take stairs, and so as people age, they can age in place. The current architectural design accommodates a lot of community rooms, on-site laundry, those types of amenities. This specific location on Barney Road is very close to a number of amenities. The Shaw's up the hill. It's within walking distance of the Breeze bus stop, several banks, those types of things. And if we're looking at the comprehensive plan that we're looking to update, this development really meets a lot of those goals stated in that comprehensive plan. Next slide, yeah. So there's a couple things that we're here to chat about tonight, and I'll talk about kind of the biggest one. That's the affordable housing TIF. And in affordable housing TIF, just a quick summary, the property pays full taxes to the town as determined by the tax assessor. What we're proposing is half of those taxes that we pay to the town go into one bucket, and the other goes into the general fund. The separate bucket is then reimbursed back to the developer to help pay for operating costs. It's a convoluted arrangement rather than just only collecting half at first, but just to kind of so you understand the mechanics of that. What that does is several things. One, it lowers our property tax burden, which allows the property to borrow more money in order to be able to have enough money to start construction and complete the building. So it is a gap filler in that respect, that we need so much money per apartment to build, and this allows us to borrow and more money to do that. The second thing is that over time, this 50% reimbursement reduces the risk of property tax mill rate increases as well as property appreciation increases to the property. If property taxes were to go up disproportionately, we would have to charge our residents more and more money, and so it allows us to mitigate the property tax risk over time. Yeah.
Will that stabilize the rent also?
Yes. Yeah, it does stabilize the rent. So, for example, on some of our other properties where we have the TIFs, specifically at Oakleaf 2, we don't raise the rents as much as we're legally allowed to because we are collecting enough money to help. We put some money in a rainy day fund in case the boiler goes down or when the roof needs replaced. But if the property taxes were going up more, then we would have to increase our rents more to pay for those. And so that helps us with long-term asset management stability. It makes the property more financially feasible, and it also allows us to keep the rental rates affordable. So for all of those reasons, that's why the affordable housing TIF is an important tool. And for you all, it's really one of the biggest, easiest levers to be able to help support affordable housing in Freeport. As we were talking earlier about what can we do as a town as opposed to federal state policy, this is one that you actually have a lot of control over, or the most control over. Tim, can you go to the next slide? And so really, to summarize where we are today, after conversations with Brett, FETC, and Caroline, we're looking for direction from the council to do a number of things. One is to I can go down the list while we're up here. So, is that we are putting together to authorize the staff to begin compiling and spending staff resources and time on compiling an affordable housing TIF application. And so really just and Caroline can clarify this if she wants, but it's allowing her the understanding that the council is in support of this project in general, and so that we can continue to work on that effort together with the town staff. And then at a later date, the next council meeting or whenever you decide, we would like to come back and have you vote on that final package in approval to be able to send to Maine Housing for the approval of the actual TIF application. The other big thing is that we are working on submitting a funding application for the bulk of the money that would be able to build these buildings, and that application is due towards the end of the month. And as part of that application, we do need some letters from the town and in regards to a growth management, acknowledging that it's a little in the weeds, but it's just, there's letters in support of that application. So acknowledging that the properties within the growth district, things around a sidewalk being built along Varney Road, that we would be able to build that sidewalk according to town standards, just things like that. Again, Caroline would like direction from the council to begin working with us to get those letters ready. And then lastly, I think with all of this effort, it's also further direction that the current zoning does not allow us to build the proposed project. And so we still have a lot of work there to make sure that we are going through and meeting all of the site plan review. And we intend to do that starting at the beginning of this coming year. But to get ahead of that, there is the planning team at the town is amending zoning ordinances to become in compliance with 2003, LD 2003. And so it would be great to be able to work in tandem with the town so that we're not having to come back and rewrite, asking for changes after the fact in order to specifically fit our project. We can work together to kind of make common sense and make sure everything's aligned and integrated. So that's the presentation. I'd love to take questions or, yeah. John?
I just want to point out that it sounds like it's way down in the weeds, but it's actually pretty significant difference that this is not a TIF that goes through Department of Economic and Community Development like most of our TIF districts do. We also have an opportunity as a community to work directly with Maine Housing and help the applicant get an affordable housing TIF designation for the property. And it's actually a faster and less restrictive process for the town to go through than going through a typical economic development TIF, which Brett knows plenty about and would be our shepherd for that. So it's a different channel. It has the same net effect, which is it creates an opportunity for us to help participate in the support of this project. We're contributing 50% of a future value. We have 100% of zero right now. So 50% of something in the future is more than 100% of zero. So just trying to remind folks that that's how we're going to be able to support that. This will be newfound value in the community, and we're going to be supporting it directly with a property tax rebate that, as Matt says, allows the project to have a more lean operating budget. Therefore, they can borrow more money from Maine Housing to get the thing done. And it's a process that's entirely contained at Maine Housing.
I could just add real quickly too, Matt did a great job bringing FEDC back into it briefly and just reiterating that the town has an established TIF policy from 2010. So this is something the town's got a formal policy in place. And FEDC discussed this on August 7th and found that this project is consistent with the TIF policy. It furthers the comprehensive plan. If you were at the 822 workshop, it was clear that there's 150 positions open in Freeport right now. Those workers can't find housing nearby. So this helps the economics as well. And so FEDC found that it supports that this project advances the TIF policy. It is consistent with the TIF policy, and as John said, this project won't happen without a town TIF because they won't be able to get the Maine State housing. So it's tax revenue that we can generate. In addition, it's going to contribute some new sidewalk, good connectivity on Barney Street, and it's going to contribute to our friends over at the sewer district as well. So that's why FEDC found it supportive and is very excited about this project, and hopefully we can move it forward together.
Yeah, Darrell, and then Ed.
How do we come up with 30 years? And you know the discussions, Brett, we've had on other questions, and I like, personally speaking, you know, lesser time. It would work with, you know, if we did it for 15 years or 20 years is the question I would have.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's maybe two answers. One, 30 years is the trust looks and owns properties for a very long time. And so we're a long view organization. And so 30 years is, as I said about that asset management and keeping rents affordable, that's kind of a reasonable time horizon for us. So that's one reason. The second reason is that so we are submitting a 9% low-income housing tax credit application to Maine Housing for a boatload of money. We might not be successful this year because we weren't able to get our TIF and our planning board in place now. That's not abnormal in these deals where you kind of have an idea. Sometimes it works out the first year. Sometimes it doesn't happen until the second or even third year. And so having that extra 30-year, that 30-year time horizon rather than 15 years gives us an extra point in that application process. And so should we not be successful this year in receiving funding, then that would be beneficial for our application next year.
The Maine housing mortgage is also for 30 years, and so the rents are restricted for 30 years, and so it's a little hard to tell the lender, well, the rents could go up in year 22, but you're still required to.
Well, that's another point, John. Thank you for that, yeah.
Ed?
Has anybody quantified the TIF contribution to this? I mean, the projected.
Yes, that was in FEDC's packet, and
It's about
the total contribution,
about 720 grand.
720,000.
Over 30 years?
Yep. 720 more or less to the general fund, 720 to the project.
It's about $24,000 a year each.
So the town gets the equivalent.
It's 50/50.
50/50 both ways.
Worth noting too, Brett, because I know I beat you up a little bit on these numbers to make sure they're accurate, but there's also a tax shift that you might want to talk about, because in addition to that.
Thanks, Dan. This is an important data point. It's good for Freeport. From your recent experience with the Concord Gully TIF, because of the school funding formula from the state, Freeport at that time in 2020 was not eligible for the tax shift benefit on the education formula. Because of the valuation of the total property in town relative to other communities in the state. Because the state has been pumping a lot more money into the education system, that's brought the state mill rate down. So Freeport is now eligible again to capture the tax shift benefit. And what that means is that those formulas are based on, just like if you're a property owner in town, your property is worth a certain amount, and that's worth a certain amount of the whole compared to your neighbor's properties and other properties. And the total levy is divided across all that value. The same thing happens at the state level, where Freeport has a certain value and Yarmouth has a certain value, and we contribute based on that ratio to the state coffers. And because in the past Freeport was valued higher, it was structured in a way that we couldn't recoup that benefit. that's changed because the state's injected more money into the schools. That formula has changed. Now we get the benefit of the tax shift from the education as well. So if you have the 2020 Concord Gully TIF calculations in the back of your head, this deal just got a little better for the town, quite honestly, with the way things go. And in the long term, the more that we shelter revenues, that will help us stay below that threshold again. So this is a good project, and it's even better than your recent experience would let you believe.
So bottom line, we're going to, I'll say, save $486,000 in tax shift, but more money to the schools and less county tax that we'll have to pay, things like that. So we get the benefit of that $486,000 in addition to the $716,000 in tax, in new taxes that we'll collect and keep from the project. And we get 42 units.
It goes up to whatever the rate is at that time, in 30 years.
In 30 years, you're right. Revert, yeah.
And the only one other question, this is 55 and older, correct? Okay.
Correct.
And income limited, right?
Yes, so one-person households need to make less than $50,000 a year, and a two-person household would need to make less than $57,000 a year.
And just to round it out too, Matt mentioned the elevator, community space for lounges, there'll be a library, office space, on-site laundry, community garden area. This was within a mile of downtown, where that back trail is going to go through behind L.O. Bean. So this is going to be walkable to downtown. And I believe there's going to be 10 hours of direct services for the residents on site a week as well. So there's a lot of amenities that come with this for a population that could really benefit from it in Freeport.
Jake?
Do we have unlimited TIFs for this mechanism, or is there an opportunity cost to doing this project versus another one?
We're in pretty good shape. The state caps the total value you can TIF at 5% and the total land you can TIF at 5%, and we're well below that. However, this Varney Road just happens to be in the geography for that transit-oriented development TIF that we've talked about. So that was a great tee up for me there. That transit-oriented development TIF is exempt from the 5% value cap and the 5% land cap. And if you think about the geography that we're talking about, it's downtown and a lot of the dense development. So if we're exempt and we TIF that, it's a good move from a financial standpoint, and it doesn't impact our ability to do other projects outside of that area. So this is great. As John said, we can move quicker now with the affordable housing for this project, but long term, we can do more in this geography with a bigger TIF concept if we're open to that.
Yeah, sorry, Darryl.
Can we approve it tonight?
Yeah. So to that point, the policy and the state application requires a public hearing and a vote. We've got a little more cleanup on this to do. For example, the assessor just returned today, and there's been some subtle adjustments to what you've seen. It wouldn't impact the split, it wouldn't impact the performance, but just to make sure that this is really airtight and really clean, we could come back. If you wanted to set a public hearing soon, you could do that. I think, and I asked the development team, I think the first meeting in October is soon enough to take that vote. So this would give us a little more time in the next week or two to make sure that this is airtight and clean. But really, Darryl, I'm glad to hear that you got that support. It's just a matter of making sure that the public has a chance to weigh in, and that when we submit the application to the state, who also has to bless it, that it's clean and it's well done. So we want to keep moving. I like that spirit. It's great.
I will note that I have some concerns about the timing. The last time you took action on this, you had a complete package, so you do need to have that. If you guys are supportive of this, we need to reach out to the town attorney and work on getting a credit enhancement agreement. I'm not sure the details on what they're looking for from the town of Freeport, but you've already given me directive for some other time-sensitive projects that are ahead of this. So I don't see how we could get this back this month. I think, depending on others, October still stresses me out, but would be more reasonable, assuming that we're not bumping the other projects like the new committee and that design review fee and all this other stuff we have going on.
And you mentioned something earlier that you said the project can't be built until we change the zoning to comply with LD 2003.
Correct. Yeah, and receive funding and go through the financing process. So in the I could have shown a development timeline 101, but this is just very start of pulling together our financing. Once Maine Housing even approves the project, if we were to win an award, they don't really announce that until November. And then sometimes it takes until January, February to get that in writing on a piece of paper. And then it's another 6 months at least to kind of go through their construction review process and closing process. It is nice to get things just kind of moving. The credit enhancement agreement actually shouldn't need much more than a name change and some detail changes, because we did just do it for Quarry Ridge, and it's basically identical. We're not looking for any different legal language than that agreement. So from like a process standpoint, the paperwork is actually, like Brett said, kind of cleaning up some of the numbers, making sure our narrative is good. The credit enhancement agreement is pretty easy. But acknowledging that you are a busybody, not busybodies, but a very a busybody that has a lot in front of them, and so it is up to you all to figure that out, your priorities.
Yeah.
I will say that it would be nice to have some direction to Caroline to like she mentioned, to kind of put it on their plate, and feel like this is something that you all are in support of. And so again, Daryl, thank you for your quick desire to approve it. But yeah.
John?
Could we set an agenda item for the 19th of September to set the public hearing and then have the public hearing on the 5th? Or the 3rd of October?
Maybe. I don't know that our current attorney reviewed the last TIF. I think we would want them to review that on our behalf. I have not reached out to them because I didn't know where you're going to go. You can't really set a public hearing if you don't have the document set up. So I can make some calls tomorrow. If we think we will have stuff, then I think you could put it on the 19th, but if we don't think you're gonna have stuff, you might need to wait till October 3rd.
The 19th would be when we set the public hearing and then have the public hearing on October 3rd.
Right, but to set it, you usually have the document in hand
You
for
don't think
public
you don't
review.
think we can get that in 2 weeks?
I don't know. Just being honest.
Yeah, it's been a challenge to get stuff reviewed from
This is
legal.
this is a different attorney at Drummond Woodson, the same attorney
okay.
used for the last one, but I don't know that he worked on the Oakleaf one
Okay.
in the past.
Yep. I'm guessing there's support for this that I haven't heard otherwise, and it's, a relatively easy decision. So, fair enough to say that you've got a lot of other stuff on your plate. We're in support of this. We'd like to move it forward
As soon as we can.
as soon as we can.
Not bumping certain other projects.
Right. Ideally, if we could do it before the election again, because we're all familiar with it by now. And the one request I would have for you guys is if you can email whatever materials you presented to us tonight to Chris Wolf so she could put it on the website. Because if we're going to kind of put this on a fast track and we want the public to be aware of what's going on, so any information they can have about the project will help the public hearing go faster because they'll see what a great project it is.
And then I think just looking at the process, like FEDC already had a meeting. It says you guys are supposed to have a joint workshop with FEDC. Is that something you're okay waiving because they had their meeting and you're going to have your public hearing? Or is that something you feel like we need to schedule? And then Brett and I talked today about getting some department heads together in the room to review it and just share their thoughts on it.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a few steps that need to happen, but fair enough. Seems fair to say that you have council support for moving it forward.
Could we push to have all this buttoned up by the 19th as a goal? And if we don't get there, we don't get there, but if we do, that we could look at early October?
I think we'd review it as soon as it's ready, right? It's
Yeah,
just a
that's what I
question of,
heard you guys say.
yeah, it's a question of when we can get the lawyers and staff to have time.
One suggestion, Matt, to just maybe put what the the income targeting rents, and you mentioned what the household income would be to afford the rent. I think that's a really critical data point for the general public who doesn't understand how affordable housing finance works.
Yep, I can add a slide for that. That's great feedback.
That'd be great.
And so, like I said before, the TIF is one piece. We do also have other documents that we'll need to work with the town to make sure we get on letterhead and signed by the end of the month for our application as well.
Right.
So, okay.
None of those require a vote.
They don't require a vote. I just want Caroline to feel comfortable with that she has direction from you all. And that, again, not a vote, but as Dan said, that there's general council support, and so.
Tim, I know you haven't gotten a chance to speak, but I saw you at the housing workshop, so thank you for coming to that, and thank you for proposing the project, and Matt as well. We sorely need it. You know, we've been talking about affordable housing and how do we do it, and it's guys like you that make it happen, so thank you for putting in the effort. Thanks for staying up so late on your first day back, so.
Yeah.
I appreciate
it's
it.
like 1:30.
At least, yeah. Super. All right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, Tim. Brett, you don't get to go yet. You don't get to go home yet. You have one more item on the agenda, which I think we can do relatively quickly. It's the last item tonight.
Yes, I'm certain Brett can do it very
Brett is the man to get it done quickly. So he's presenting the overview of the Freeport Downtown Momentum Grant Program. So we allocated some money for this. He's outlining the structure of it. If everything goes well, at the next meeting, we'll bring it back for us to vote and establish it. So tonight is an introduction and overview.
Great, thanks for that. You'll recall a month or so ago, we came and talked about the Business Fit Up Grant Program, and that used $60,000 of a total of 100 that was allocated for this budget cycle. So this program is looking at the other 40. And really, this is designed to hopefully make it easy so that people can understand how to access and participate and how to spend those dollars. So the Business Fit Up program was really just that, about fitting up commercial spaces and activating dark spots into vibrant downtown destinations. This program is not about private commercial spaces, it's about public areas. And it's about bringing energy and amenities to public spaces that people see and that they'll want to hang out in and spend time downtown. So it's very similar to the Business Fit Up program. If you look at it, there's just some tweaks in terms of instead of a property owner or a business applying for these funds, it's kind of cool. It's an opportunity for a resident to propose an idea. It's an opportunity for an organization to propose an idea, to add lighting to a space, to put in some planters, to add soften the streetscape and add some beauty to it. And it's really designed to implement the downtown vision. So that's the idea. Talked with the finance director about how to administer some of this. The Business Fit Up program is really clean because it's a reimbursement. So the applicant or the recipient has to demonstrate that they've checked all the boxes, and then we give them half the total cost. This is a little bit different animal because if you're a resident or organization, you're not going to have that money to front. So it's a little bit different than that, but working with Jessica, we designed a process that I think will give the town that level of financial control, but also not be a barrier to participation. And so if a resident wanted to do a project, they would have to find a contractor who's, has a tax ID, has insurance, has the ability to operate in a public space without triggering concerns about slip and falls and liabilities for the town. So that's a process that would work. And then if it was a nonprofit organization that had an idea, if they have a tax ID and they have insurance and they have all those things, that they could actually carry out the work themselves. So that's the general idea of it. There'd be a committee that would be representative. It would be the town manager, Complete Streets, a couple of downtown vision strategy folks that would look at these proposals on a regular schedule, quarterly. We had a good meeting with the Downtown Vision Task Force a few weeks ago and got some input on the general broad brushstrokes of this idea and got some really good feedback. They were excited about it. They thought instead of having one big cycle with the full amount, that you should break it up quarterly and kind of spread it out that way so there's more energy and new ideas, and you learn as you go and adapt as you learn. So that's an opportunity there to move on the quarterly. So what we're proposing is using that quarterly approach, but because by the time we're going to be doing our first cycle, we'll be about halfway through the fiscal year, that instead of dividing that 40 into 4 10s, the first cycle would be for 20, and that way we get it going. So that's a couple of things. And then, another thing that came out of the feedback from the Downtown Task Force work group was that this could be an opportunity to engage underrepresented residents that don't typically come out and participate in these processes, to your point, Chip. Young people, you don't see them really engaged in town policy making, but they've got opinions and we want them in our community. So the other kind of fun idea would be to include a high school student on the grant committee. So we're making sure that there's a youth vote on that. And that to your point previously, Matt, about a specific criteria that we're evaluating these projects against, that activating spaces, expanding experiences, and beautifying the streetscapes are important, but also to engage underrepresented communities. So really trying to bring more people into the fold and have a hands-on opportunity to implement the downtown vision. That's the Momentum program. Is that
Brett,
quick enough?
would you add VC2 in addition to VC1 so we can capture all the way up to Mallet Drive?
Yeah, we
In
can
case
do
there's
that.
anything up there?
Good catch.
And then clarification, public spaces doesn't mean necessarily that it has to be on town property, right? If somebody has a private space in front of their building that they want to dedicate to public use, they could apply.
Yeah, that's a good point, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
So long as it's publicly accessible and high visibility, that's good. And talking with some of the staff, there's also well-founded concerns that, as Matt would say, we're a busy body, we're a busy town, and the staff is currently very busy. And so to throw more onto them could create challenges. So being very thoughtful about, and maybe it's better if it's a privately controlled space, as long as it's publicly accessible, and you've got staff there that's not town staff who would make sure it's cleaned up and looking nice. So we'll work through that as a committee, but 2 points to take away is sensitive to staff time and what the implementation of this would mean for our staff. And 2, it could be a privately owned space as long as it's public and highly visible.
And the only other question I had is, as far as awarding the grants, I think what you have is anything under 10,000, the grant committee just makes the grant and is done. Anything over 10,000 would come back to the council. Just looking to you guys to get a sense of, do you want this to be just as quick as can be, have the committee do as much as they can, or do you want to have more say in where these small grants go? They're typically 2,500 to 5,000 is your target?
Yeah, and that was another good point that came out of the Downtown Task Force was let's not make each decision really high stakes, putting a lot of chips into the play. Let's spread it out, make it less of a big decision. And so most of these grants are probably going to be they're going to stay below that $10,000 threshold anyway. But that's a good point to clarify.
So you guys good with that? Just have them done quickly? We don't need to see them all. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. Okay, awesome.
All right,
So
good.
we'll see this again in 2 weeks to vote on.
Yeah, I'll add a couple changes and bring it back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. Thanks
Well
for your
done,
work on
Brett.
this. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, on both
Thanks,
programs.
guys.
Yeah.
Good night.
And so at the same meeting, you guys are going to appoint committees, or is that committee members? or does
Yeah,
that
I think
need
we
to
have both.
go-
I think we just do it at council unless anybody objects, because we have 2 grant committees to appoint. The last grant you just talked about, and this one. Then we just need to pick council members and whatever to be
So
in these committees.
it doesn't
And
need
high
to
school
go
students. if we need.
to,
Okay, I make a motion
I don't think it needs
to
to go
adjourn
to
the
finance
motion,
committee.
adjourn the meeting.
That's a good motion. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, all in favor? You're adjourned at 9:45 PM. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Just made better info.